2017. We're ready to go, Madam Chair.
Roll call.
John Bogart.
Here.
Evelyn Ascona.
Here.
Charlotte McNair. Doug Sheehan.
Here.
Peg Chester. John Zimmerman.
Here.
Ivan Adorno.
Here.
Tracy Paparo. Sue McElligott.
Here.
John Cox.
Here.
Nancy Capola.
Here. Public announcement, Open Public Meetings Act.
Please be advised that the notice requirement of the Open Public Meetings Act apply to satisfy the annual notice to be sufficient notice of the time, place, and conduct of all public meetings of the Board of Adjustment of the City of New Brunswick to be filed with the city clerk and placed on the appropriate bulletin board lobby of City Hall, 78 Fire Street, New Brunswick, New Jersey, and will transmit it to the official newspapers of the City of New Brunswick, including the Home Tribune and Star Ledger.
Salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Minutes of the board's May 22nd, 2017 meeting.
Madam Chair, copies of the minutes were distributed to all the board members. Unless there's any changes or addition, a motion to approve will be in order. I'll make a motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion good.
Communications and reports, resolutions of memorialization of approval, D&J Auto Service, Z-2017-03, variance application for the use of the existing building for the operation of an automobile accessory store located at 20 Georges Road, Block 354, Block 5, zoning district C-1.
And Madam Chair, members have received copies of the resolution. Unless you have any changes, a motion to approve the resolution would be in order.
Available to vote are Ascona, Sheehan, Zimmerman, Adorno, and Cox.
Motion.
Second. Evelyn Ascona.
Yes.
Doug Sheehan.
Yes.
John Zimmerman.
Yes.
Ivan Adorno.
Yes.
John Cox.
Yes.
Okay, new business. Collegiate Development Group Z-2017-04. It's a preliminary and final site plan and variance application for the construction of a mixed-use building located at 78 Easton Avenue, Block 56, lots 1.01, 1.03, and 14, zoning district C-3B. Before we hear it, does anyone on the board have any conflicts for this application? Okay.
Thank you, members of the board. Thomas F. Kelso on behalf of the applicant, Collegiate Development Group. As the introduction indicates, this is an application for preliminary and final site plan with variance approvals to construct a 9-story mixed-use building which will contain approximately 9,000 square feet of commercial retail space on the ground floor and will contain a total of 181 residential units, which is comprised of makeup of 52 one-bedroom units, 6 two-bedroom units, 35 three-bedroom units, 31 four-bedrooms, and 57 five-bedrooms. The building will also contain 2 levels of underground parking, lobby area, and amenity space. The project itself is intended to be marketed to the Rutgers undergraduate community. As the board members know, that this location is a very high-profile location at the corner of Easton Avenue and Hamilton Street, right across from my law office. And it really is adjacent and really touches on the university campus. It's a block away from the recently completed yard, and really, we think, provides a perfect opportunity to create what is for the first time this scale, private sector owned, managed, and developed for undergraduate community. The use itself is a permitted use in the zone. However, we're here before the zoning board because there are 2 D variances which are required, which require the board to hear it, and that is the height that's being requested of 115 feet, and also the FAR, which by the nature of the size of the building exceeds what otherwise would be in the C3D zone. We also are requesting a series of bulk variances for minimum rear yard, minimum side yard, minimum front yard, building coverage, impervious coverage, and for parking. We believe after much review of this plan, several reviews by the Technical Advisory Committee, we've been able to create a building which we believe fits within the scale between the downtown development district and this now graduating out into what would be the lower size buildings along Easton Avenue. It's a perfect transitional property. My intent is to provide with you 5 witnesses this evening. We will provide a representative of Collegiate Development, which, by the way, is based in St. Louis, Missouri. Our civil engineer will provide engineering testimony. We have our architect from Q3 from Massachusetts. We have our traffic engineer to provide traffic testimony. And of course, finally, as we always do, we will clean up with our professional planner and hopefully convince you to support all of the variances that are being asked for this evening. There are 4 waivers that our engineer will touch upon, which I think you've seen many times. The parking stall size, aisle widths, there's a buffer to residential area, and certain ones regarding foundation plannings. Although these are minor in nature, we will provide testimony to support them. And again, as I've said, they're waivers that I know the board has seen probably frequently in other applications. With that as a background, unless there's questions for me, at this time I will call my first witness, Mr. Brant Stiles.
Can you raise your right hand and state your name and spell your last name, please?
Brant Stiles, S-T-I-L-E-S.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Brant, you're familiar with the application of Collegiate Development Group that's before the board this evening? And you are here from St. Louis, correct?
St. Louis, address 7711 Bonham Avenue.
And I believe you are actually one of the founders of community development. Is that the case?
Correct.
Could you give us a little background of the company itself, what your experience is, what attracts you here to New Brunswick, and give us an overview of the vision that Collegiate Development has for this project.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, I'd just like to thank the board for their time tonight and staff for the efforts that have been put forth prior to get us to where we are today and help make this project a better project for the community. Collegiate Development Group was really founded on a mission to help create an unmatched experience around cutting-edge properties and premier locations. To date, we've developed over 2,800 beds, have another 1,800 beds in planning, totaling about $500 million of development across the United States. The vision for this site was really apparent in the beginning, the first time we saw it. We saw a really unique opportunity to develop a mixed-use project that will help increase the vibrancy of a main edge or main sort of artery in town, right in Hamilton, Easton, by providing really an active ground floor use. And on top of that ground floor, creating enough density to support the ground floor retail, but also helping bring undergraduate, graduate students out of the neighborhoods, out of the houses, and into a more controlled environment, professionally managed environment that has some securities that really just aren't seen. Key card access. You can't enter the property without credentials. There's a professionally managed management company on staff. Cameras all over the place, so it creates a very unique experience, a homey experience, but at the same time a safe and comfortable experience as well. Why New Brunswick? When we go into a market, we look for supply and demand gaps, and what we feel like here with we've seen really strong enrollment growth, but there hasn't been a larger purpose-built project that provides the amenities, the safety, and the experience that really most markets have seen and have been very successful in delivering. And I think a lot of that really has to do with go around professional management, like I said, amenities, and safety. The process moving forward, we've got our team put together. We've been working diligently in trying to make this project as good of a project as it possibly can, working with the community and the experts that we've brought together in our team. So we're really excited to enter into the community and really bring a top quality project to New Brunswick.
Thanks, man. I have no further questions for you. If the board wishes to direct them.
Any questions? Thank you.
All right, thanks. At this time, I have a call Mr. Christian Roach for testimony.
Ready? Raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please.
It's Christian Roach, R-O-C-H-E.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
I do.
Chris, before we begin, let me just get your credentials. You are a licensed professional engineer of the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
That's correct.
In that capacity, you're familiar with the...
Mr. Roach has testified from this board multiple times and I'll vouch for his credentials.
Have your credentials changed since you've been here?
They have not.
Okay. Well, that's nice.
Great. So what I was hoping to do is just give a real brief overview on where the site is located, what's existing on site today, and then I was going to go with the architect to get into the renderings, give you a feel for what the building's going to look like before providing more detailed site civil engineering testimony. So the project site we're here to talk about today is Block 56, Lot 1.01, Lot 1.03, and Lot 14 per the city tax map. In total, the project site encompasses 0.89 acres. As Mr. Kelso mentioned, it's located at the Easton Avenue and Hamilton Street intersection. It's bound by Easton Avenue to the north, Hamilton Street to the east, Gilman Street to the south, and residential units to the west. The site's currently occupied by a 3-story medical office building, as well as 2 residential units. The medical office building right now has site access from Hamilton Street, and the 2 residential units have driveways with access to Easton Avenue. One thing I did want to mention, proximity to the site, is how close it is to Rutgers University and the College Avenue campus of the bus system. It's an under 5-minute walk. It's 0.1 miles to get from our site to the College Avenue bus stop. It's also located in very close proximity to the DEFCO project, which was just completed, which was the yard. So I'll turn it over to the architect again to the renderings, and then we'll get into site circulation and engineering issues.
At this time, I will call Mr. Brian O'Connor for testimony.
Can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name, please?
Brian O'Connor, O-C-O-N-N-O-R.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
I do.
Brian, you are a licensed professional architect in the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
That is correct.
And many other states, I assume.
Correct.
In that capacity, you are familiar with the architectural components of the plan that's being presented to the board this evening?
I am.
If you could then please give the board the benefit of your professional qualifications and experience.
I've been practicing, I founded my own firm with a business partner about 13 years ago in Massachusetts. I've been practicing for over 20 years at this point. We do work nationally, a lot of student housing, multifamily, corporate, medical office. We have current work in 22 or 23 different states. I travel around quite a bit, and we have a substantial expertise in this sort of area of urban development.
I will offer Mr. O'Connor.
Yes, we'll accept it.
If you could, Brian, then just give us an overview of the building. I know Chris, wanted to lay out the location, and now if you could give us some specifics about the development, your vision of the building itself, and feel free to use the words, and we'll mark them as you go forward.
Okay, so I'm going to take everyone on a quick sort of tour of what we're thinking for the building design and architecture, walk through the plans quickly. As Brent mentioned from the beginning, and I just want to reiterate looking at this plan, I think what's really important about this site is recognizing that there are edges here, and there's a primary intersection here that has a relationship back to the university, but we also are proximate to some residential areas here. And so understanding that this building wants to do different things and really needs to be sensitive to different conditions, we thought was important. So,
Mr. O'Connor, before you go on, I'm sorry, can we mark that as A1?
Yeah, that should be A1.
so one of the first things that we did is we looked at some of the other buildings in the area, and I'll just point out a few of the.
Excuse me, right, this will be A2. If you could give him the pen, you can mark the numbers. Sure. My fault. Just mark A2 on the top, and we'll go back, and Chris, I mark A1 when he gets back.
So what we did is we looked at some of the other larger buildings in the immediate contextual area here. And obviously, you guys are quite familiar with the yard, about a block away at 14 stories, the View down on the corner here at 22 stories, and then the Aspire at 17. All of these buildings are trying to accomplish some sort of contextual relationship to the neighborhood. We think there's a lot of good things going on. Our proposed site is highlighted here in blue, and what it does is it definitely has a relationship to some of the other larger buildings, but we also recognize that we want it to be a little bit more sensitive to the neighborhood edges. So at 9 stories, we're significantly lower than any of these other buildings, and we wanted to really take an approach to the building that would allow it to feel a little more at home by really focusing on the massing of the building, the materials, the scale, and really thinking about how the mixed-use attributes would contribute to its location. So I'm going to get into a little more detail on that in a minute, but I just wanted to walk through the plans quickly. There are some technical details related to parking and service and loading that Chris will get back into in a minute, but just very quickly, we have Easton across the top, Hamilton diagonal over here. And what I really wanted to do is just point out that we have 2 floors of parking below grade.
Excuse me, that's A3.
A3, sorry.
Is this part of the packet?
Yeah,
I'll
it's
get
not
used
a packet.
I'll get used to the
You
layout.
don't need to mark it,
Sorry,
thank you.
we won't mark, it's in the packet.
Okay, great. So parking occurs on 2 levels below grade. One level is accessed off of Easton. It's a right in, right out, and it serves only 32 parking spaces at that level. The other parking level is 102, and it's accessed off of Golden on the other side, and this rotates down in this area here. So there's 102 spaces down there on the lowest level and 32 on the lower level from Easton. The dominant feature of this floor is really the retail space here and the entry to the primary residential over on Hamilton. And the goal of this project is to really create a very active, very public, glassy, transparent front door condition on both of those streets. And so we have about 9,000 square feet of retail use in this area coming up and occupying the corner at the intersection. This retail is accessed through Hardscape Plaza area and a series of public doors on Easton. Primary access and entry to the residential building above is over approximately in the center of the site along Hamilton. So the retail glass transparency wraps around that corner and down the leading edge of Hamilton, and then it transitions to another very transparent frontage for the leasing office. There also is loading and trash and service, and as I mentioned, Chris will get into this in a little bit more detail. There's a little bit of bike storage on this level, but it's predominantly the lower level. So there are 160 bike parking spaces as well. As we move up to the second floor, this level is really dominated by the amenity space over here on the corner. So we're taking that transparent glass corner retail and we're bringing it up into the building at that corner. These are really building amenities for the residents. So there's a fitness center over here in the corner. There's lounges, study areas, yoga rooms, game rooms. What we've actually done is notch the building in this location at Hamilton, which you'll see on the renderings in a few minutes, to create some outdoor space at that elevated level on Hamilton. What this does is it creates an outdoor amenity space not only for the residents, but by bringing the building mass here, it really pulls back from Hamilton and creates some relief along that street edge. So there's one outdoor courtyard here in this triangle, and then there's another outdoor courtyard in this area right here. The remainder of the floor is dominated by residential units, but there also are trash rooms and some other service functions as well. The typical residential floor, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here, but this is fairly typical up through the building. And the unit mix that was mentioned earlier is basically located on this floor and stacks up through the building all the way to the top. If we look at I have a few perspective views I wanted to share. This is a view.
A3? Can you just mark that as A3?
This would be A3.
Sure. This is a view standing on Hamilton, looking west as you cross the intersection with Easton. And what we wanted to show here is really the sort of importance of that corner and the vibrancy that we're trying to bring to the building at the ground floor. So you can see the very transparent, glassy condition for the retail piece here and the residential entry as it comes around the corner. And what we've tried to do is start to bring that up into the building with the amenity level here. And then we wanted to bring some of that glass up into the building to really create some iconic sort of view of the building at the corner. And then what we've allowed it to do is this glassiness at the corner transitions as it moves back into the neighborhood to a much more sort of familiar residential pattern. And what we've tried to do is really create articulation and development in the building back here that's not as conspicuously obvious up towards the intersection. So we're creating that transition. What we have is we have about a 2-foot overhang that runs around the building on both Easton and Hamilton that creates a very delineated residential sort of pedestrian scale at the ground floor. And then we have a building mass here, this lighter colored volume that sits about 30 inches off the face of the building, creating a break between the 6th and the 7th floor. And then at the top floor, what we've done is we've actually started to create these notches in the building to break down the roof line so that you don't have sort of a continuous uninterrupted roof line along the edge. As far as materials go, we wanted to keep the base of the building really light and really active. And so we're proposing sort of a wood finish down there at the base. The balance of the building is sort of a mixture of different high quality rain screen panel systems. And again, these are designed a little bit differently than some of the other larger buildings we talked about earlier to really have a smaller scale to the panel and bring some texture and some color to the building. And then we have one more view that's down Easton as well, down Hamilton as well, looking in the other direction, looking eastbound this time. A4. A4, yep. And in this view, you can start to see the edge of the main residential entry down here. You can see a little bit of that elevated courtyard that I talked about here. And here you really start to see how critical that notch in the building is along Hamilton to start to break this thing down into different pieces. We've also taken a notch out of the top of the building over here to really cut that corner off, again, to sort of eliminate some of these hard edges that may feel continuous. So by breaking down the corner up at the top here and peeling out a section of the building along Hamilton, it really starts to make it read less like a street wall. What we also really wanted to focus on is the overhang, and the changing materials here really creates a residential and pedestrian scale datum at that lower level that we really want you to feel as you come into the much more, smaller scale residential neighborhood, so that it feels like there's some familiarity as you're walking down the street edge. Here as well, you can see the lighter color volume that's brought into the back that splits the 6th and the 7th floors. And then there's a lot of little subtle detail in here that we think is also really important. The repetitive window pattern that comes up through the building actually breaks at the same point. And the windows for the top 3 floors have some subtle shift back and forth. And what we're trying to do there is sort of recognize the idea that buildings feel taller when you have pure stacked windows. And if you look to some of the other buildings that I referenced earlier that are in this area, a lot of the verticality of those buildings is really highlighted by the stacked window pattern. So we wanted to break that down a little as we got to the top. That's it.
Any no further questions for Mr. O'Connor? If not, then I would call Christian back to complete his testimony.
I'm going to mark this A5. This is just a colored site plan rendering. So I'm going to talk briefly about the site circulation. We're going to talk about some of the landscape features. I'm going to very briefly talk about stormwater management. and utilities. And I'm also going to identify the variances and waivers that we're requesting tonight, and then further input and further justification for those variances and waivers will be provided by our professional planner and our traffic engineer. And looking at the site plan, you'll see the building takes up the majority of the site. The building footprint is approximately 30,930 square feet, and that takes up 80% of the 0.89 acre property. As a result of that, there are several lot coverage and building coverage variances that are required as part of this application. The first variance is a building coverage requirement. In the permitted zoning, the maximum building coverage is 50%, and we're asking for a variance of 80%. The same is true of the lot coverage or impervious coverage requirement. The maximum allowable is 90%, and we slightly exceed this at 92%. As Mr. Kelso mentioned, based on a 9-story building, we are asking for a variance on the height. The maximum permitted height is 40 feet. We're requesting a building height of 115 feet, as well as the floor area ratio. The maximum floor area ratio is 1.2, and we're requesting 7.6 in that regard. As I'm going with variances, I'll wrap up the other two. As far as the building setback, the required front yard setback is 15 feet. We're asking for a front yard setback along Easton Avenue of 2.75 feet, and the required rear yard setback is 10 feet. And we have one pinch point where we have a setback of only 5 feet. Most of the area along the rear yard does meet that 10-foot setback requirement. There's just one small area which requires us to ask for the variance. From the parking perspective, we are proposing 134 parking stalls within the garage. As mentioned during architectural testimony, most of these stalls are going to be accessed from Gilman Street. 102 stalls are accessible from there. And there's a very small percentage of stalls, 32 parking stalls, which will be accessed from Easton Avenue. One of the keys about this Easton Avenue entrance for us was we really wanted to make sure we weren't going to impact the intersection or traffic operations on Easton Avenue. And to prevent that, one, we're going to put signs up, but I think all of you know college students don't always follow the signs. So we are proposing a curb island, which significantly limits the ability of vehicles to make left turns into and out of the Easton Avenue intersection. The Easton Avenue garage entrance. Another thing we're concerned about at the entrance points was the pedestrian and vehicular interface. These entrance points will have garage doors, which will open as the vehicles leave. We're going to stripe crosswalks to clearly delineate the pedestrian path and alert them that there will be vehicles entering and leaving from these locations, as well as having visual detection devices. We're going to have flashing lights above the garages at both entrances to alert the pedestrians of the potential vehicles leaving the facility. With regard to the parking variance, based on the city standards, the project, based on residential units as well as the retail and residential components, would be required to have 362 parking stalls. I mentioned we're proposing 134 parking stalls, but before Greg Woodruff, a professional planner, gets into it, the one point I wanted to bring up was the city standards are generally based on New Jersey residential site improvement standards as far as the number of stalls per residential units. And the residential site improvement standards govern parking across the entire state. It doesn't take into consideration where you are, whether or not it's an urban environment, whether you have access to mass transit, car share, bicycles. And Greg will get into this more, but I just want to bring it up as we move along. From a landscape perspective, you heard previously that our key point on site is really the Easton Avenue and Hamilton intersection. We feel we can make this a very vibrant outdoor place. In addition to proposing sidewalks, street trees, we have a large paver plaza area, which we feel will be a great amenity to the projects. Depending on what type of restaurants and retail we have, we would envision outdoor dining at a future date. From the landscape and lighting perspective, we're meeting the city-required lighting levels with the standard PSE&G fixtures along Easton Avenue and Hamilton Street. We have some small-scale bollard lighting fixtures along the rear property line, and the purpose for that is to make sure we're not spilling over any of the light onto adjacent properties, which we're not doing with these fixtures. From a stormwater management perspective, and this kind of supports our overall building and lot coverage variances, we're only increasing impervious coverage by 0.18 acres. Typically, you can get away without having to meet state detention and city detention requirements if you're not increasing impervious coverage by 0.25 acres. However, we felt that we needed to make sure we weren't going to increase any runoff when it rains from leaving the site. So we are providing a 360-foot long underground detention pipe, which will store runoff on our site, detain it during rainfall events, and then slowly reduce it to eliminate and reduce the potential for any increase in runoff from our property. And just very briefly on the utilities, we're proposing our water service connections off of Easton Avenue, the existing 12-inch water main, which has capacity for domestic and fire service. We're proposing sanitary sewer access from Hamilton Street. There's an existing 15-inch sewer line in that area, which has plenty of capacity to accommodate our services. And then all the electrical and telecom services will be provided off of Gilman Street. We have a transformer and generator area at the southeast corner of the site, and this will be enclosed by a screening fence, which is actually the same exact screening fence we use at the yard. It's been through the city approval process previously to screen it and just ensure it's not an eyesore at the location that's proposed at. Going back to the parking, I did want to touch on the waivers before I turn it over to the traffic engineer. There are a few waivers inside the parking deck. The drive aisle typically required inside a parking deck is 24 feet. We're proposing 22 feet. And the parking stall widths are generally 9 by 18. We're proposing 8.5 feet by 18. These dimensions that we're proposing are very typical for private parking garages. This is not going to be an open public parking garage where you have users who are not familiar with the turning movements in the garage. And we feel these dimensions are very appropriate for the low-frequency residential use. There were two other waivers I wanted to touch on. One was in regards to the rear property line. Generally, there's a required 10-foot landscape buffer between projects if you apply to residential use. For the majority, or the northeast corner here, northwest corner I should say, we do have that 10-foot buffer, but as we go along and we have our sidewalk in the southwest corner, that buffer gets down to 5 feet. So that waiver from 10 to 5 feet in certain areas. And the other waiver we're requesting is relative to foundation plantings. Typically, the city requires foundation plantings 3 feet on center around the foundation of the building. While we are proposing a significant amount of foundation planting areas outside of the plaza area along Hamilton and Easton, right now along the west side of the property, we're just proposing grass.
If I could just ask you a couple of questions I want to touch upon. I know it was referenced by Brent earlier, but there is resident bicycle racks that are going to be in the garage, is that correct?
Correct.
And do you know the number of those?
160.
160. And I also believe there is a car share space that's being proposed in anticipation of this site becoming a car share site within the city?
Correct. Right now, we're proposing one car share spot on Gilman Street. Depending on demand, that could potentially increase the number of car share stalls.
And finally, I believe in our discussions that there's the potential that this site could also be one site for a proposed bike share program. Is that correct? Could you identify what that is and how you
Sure.
do it?
Rutgers University has been considering doing a bike share program for a number of years. It's starting to move forward in the very near future from what we've been hearing. The idea would be that not only do we have our bike stalls, private bike stalls for our residents, we would also have bike share stalls where, similar to New York City, where you can pick up a bike on one street, bike around for a few miles and drop it off at a separate location. It's something we're envisioning here in the future.
So we can provide for a bike share platform, if you will, on the site.
Correct.
I have no further questions for Mr. Rhodes.
I have a question. Can you just clarify the two parking garage entrances? So the one on Easton Avenue, that is seen for use for the residents?
Correct. All of the parking within the garage is specifically geared towards the residents, all 134 parking spaces. The way the garage is laid out, in order to maximize the parking spaces, it became more beneficial for us to have two separate entrances that are not connected, meaning that if you pull into the 32 parking stalls off of Easton, you can't get to the other parking stalls. On Gilman Street, there are 102 parking stalls you can get to. You can't get to the 32. I should mention too, because I think the next question is there's going to be assigned parking, so you know where you're parking. It's not like you're going in and
What
driving around.
about the retail that is going to be on the first level? Will we be parking for those people if there's a restaurant or anything?
As of right now, we're not proposing the on-site parking for retail. I think it's somewhat similar to the rest of Easton Avenue. My traffic engineer and I are big fans of Stuff Your Face and some other places on Easton. We generally typically park in garages or on street. You can't get.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
What was behind the decision not to put trees on the west side, specifically with residential right there and having lighting?
So our trash operations, I probably should have mentioned this, our trash operations, we have a trash room in the northwest corner of the building, and we're going to be hauling off small 2 cubic yard roll-off containers to Gilman Street on trash days. This sidewalk became necessary for us, so with only having 5 feet of required lighting, it became a little bit tight to provide full-size trees in that area. I think something that would be amenable to, if the board felt this was a good idea, is adding some potential shrubs to create some additional screening.
My concern is you've got residents and they've got bedrooms and if you've got lights coming on at night, it's almost like you're overwhelmed with this building right next to you. If there's no kind of diffusing.
The lighting was designed specifically, we'll have the high street lights, and these are low-scale bollard lights. They're only about 4 or 5 feet off the ground, and it's only directing on our site. We had the same concern. But I think we'd be amenable to, if there are certain suggestions, to try and provide some form more of screening along this western property line.
Yeah, that might be a good idea, shrubs or something.
Yeah, something to diffuse it, because that's a lot.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Probably appropriate for me at this point, before I call our next witness, I believe it's in your packet, but I just want to make sure that we have it for the record, that in relationship to parking, the New Brunswick Parking Authority has committed 50 spaces in the Gateway Garage, which, as you know, is approximately a block and a half, 2 blocks down the street. So I'll just read the letter into the record. It's a letter from Mitch Karen, the Executive Director, directed to me, dated May 16th. And it states that the Brunswick Parking Authority recognizes the parking demand the proposed project Collegiate Development Group will produce. Based on this potential parking demand from the project and the current and historical parking usage at the Gateway Garage, the New Brunswick Parking Authority has the ability to offer your client up to 50 non-exclusive parking spaces to be used for residents and visitors associated with the development. And then it goes on with wishing you and the developer much success with the project and the rest. The purpose, and this is something that has been available to us in other projects, and we believe that, and I know my client believes that the parking that's being created is sufficient for the residents, which we'll get into our testimony, but we wanted to be certain that there was an opportunity to have other monthly parking spaces for residents that may not necessarily have the opportunity to get first come, first served, but the Gateway Garage being in close proximity to this site, we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity for us. And so for the record, the Parking Authority has provided this opportunity for us. And just for the record also, we're not asking you to count that in our count because it doesn't go towards meeting our parking requirements, but it does go to, I think, mitigate the issue and provide support for the residents.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Kelso, is your client posing a voluntary waiver of parking permits
Yes.
for the project as a mitigation?
Yes.
You have that.
At this time, I will call Mr. Dan DeSario for testimony.
You can raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name.
Certainly, Dan. Last name is Disario, Disario.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Mr. DeSario, you are a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
Yes,
And I believe your area of expertise is traffic consultation,
it is.
correct? And you're familiar with the project, and I believe you did conduct a traffic evaluation for this project in anticipation of being here this evening?
I did.
I would ask if he could give the board the benefit of your professional qualifications and experience.
Certainly. It's been a long time since I've been before the zoning board in New Brunswick. I mean, I had a full head of hair the last time I was here. So I will run through my qualifications briefly. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Temple University, Master of Science in Transportation Engineering from NJIT, licensed professional engineer, as Mr. Kelso said, in New Jersey as well as several other states. I'm also a certified professional traffic operations engineer, which is a separate certification.
Mr. DeSario just recently testified in front of the planning board, and the planning board found him to be qualified as a witness.
I guess then we should accept you as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Barrett. As Mr. Kelso said, we have conducted a detailed traffic study, which was part of the submission package that hopefully all of you have received. I'm not going to really belabor traffic in terms of impacts of this project, but I'll take you through several key elements. You've heard from the applicant, this project is geared towards the college population. I fully expect that most, if not all, the residents that want to live here are going to be college students at Rutgers. I can give you a real-world example, and your board engineer is probably going to laugh because I always tell personal stories when they are relatable to what I'm testifying to. My wife's a Rutgers alum. Freshman year, River front door. Sophomore year, Tinsley, one of the quads on College Avenue. Junior year, she hated it, she lived on Bush. Now this is back in the early 90s. Her senior year, she lived in the apartments at 272 Hamilton Street. That's the exact resident that they're targeting for this development. She was 5 blocks away from the edge of campus. This location's literally on the edge of campus. So with that, I would anticipate most of the residents are going to be college students. You've heard there's an abundance of bicycle parking, which is very unique to student resident housing. You don't see that in a market rate type apartment complex where you're catering to non-students. Typically 160 bike parking spaces. This site's also adjacent, a couple blocks down from the train station. It's also around the corner, literally, from the College Avenue Rutgers transportation hub. When you take all of these mass transit opportunities together, in combination with the resident type that they're targeting, I would fully anticipate that most of the residents, one, are not going to own their own car. When my wife lived at 272 Hamilton, she didn't own a car. She walked back and forth to College Avenue. She was a psych major. And when she needed to get home, she took the bus home to Perth Airport. We're high school sweethearts, so when I came to visit her, I took the bus to College Avenue and then walked over to her park. So with that, I would anticipate that in terms of pure traffic impact, you're not going to be able to discern any noticeable changes in traffic operations in the surrounding area, because quite frankly, most of the people that live here aren't going to have cars and generate additional traffic on the adjacent streets. With respect to the retail, I think you asked, Madam Chair, we are not proposing any parking for the retail. I would point out that the retail is 9,000 square feet. The applicant intends to have about half of that be typical retail, non-food. The other half, they'd like to get a restaurant. Could be a restaurant that's similar to Stuff Your Face. And you've heard from the engineer, yes, my family and I, we like Stuff Your Face. We live in South Brunswick. When we go to Stuff Your Face, there's no parking that's dedicated for Stuff Your Face. So either we find a spot on the street if we're lucky, or we go park in the Gateway Garage. That would be the same exact situation that I would anticipate for any of the tenants that come to the retail that's proposed. And more likely, most of the activity for the retailers that would occupy that space are really going to come from the students of Rutgers and the people that live in the surrounding neighborhood, where most of, I think, the retail patrons and or restaurant patrons are going to walk. So when you start to add it all up in terms of traffic impact, I would respectfully submit to you, I don't believe the traffic impact in terms of operations in the surrounding area is going to be significant. Now, we've done a very detailed traffic study, and I'd be happy to bore you to death and take you through those details, but I'll just give you the 30,000 foot summary. We've assumed conservatively that the retail will generate its own traffic as if it weren't serving a college population in the surrounding community. We've also estimated traffic for the apartments, the 181 units that are proposed, as if they're typical market rate apartments out in suburbia, where everyone has to drive a car to get to and from that particular development. So the analysis we've conducted is extremely conservative. We've overestimated intentionally how much traffic this project will generate. And even with that overestimation, if you look at how people can get to and from the site, Eastern Avenue takes you east and west in both directions. Hamilton Street takes you north and south in both directions. Gilden Street takes you east and west in both directions. Mine Street takes you north and south in both directions. This site, being surrounded by 4 roads that are front side, has excellent access. And with that, it's able to distribute traffic in numerous directions. Having said that, boiling down the impact from a very conservative analysis that we've conducted, it amounts to one new trip conservatively every 1 to 2 minutes during the weekday morning peak hours, so 1 hour between 4 and 6, and 1 hour in the evening from 7 to 9 in the morning, and 1 hour in the afternoon from 4 to 6. So it's one new trip every 1 to 2 minutes during those peak hours. And that's assuming, again, that retail is generating its own traffic, not relying on students or people that live in the neighborhood, and that these apartments are market rate apartments, not students, where the likelihood is vehicle ownership is going to be very low. You've heard some of the waivers that the engineers identified with respect to stall width and the aisle width inside the garage. So we're looking for 22-foot wide aisles, 8.5-foot wide parking stalls. For garages, that is a typical design standard, and in particular, when you look at the type of parker that's going to use this parking, it's people that live in this complex. Those few that do own cars, they're going to have assigned stalls, so they're going to be pulling into the same stall every day. It's going to be like if any of you have a house with a garage, you probably can pull into your garage at your home with your eyes closed because you become very accustomed to doing those maneuvers. So the minimal relief that we're seeking with respect to parking stall width and aisle width inside the garage, in my opinion, is de minimis, and I would respectfully request that you grant that relief. Just so it's clear, we are proposing one driveway along each side that only serves 32 parking spaces. It's going to be a right-in, right-out driveway. You've heard from the engineer. We are going to put an island in the middle of it to reinforce that right turn circulation both into and out of that access point with appropriate signage and crosswalk across it. I will tell you, yes, will some people make a left turn in or a left turn out? Absolutely. I'm not going to tell you they'll never do it. Will it be on a rare occasion? Yes, it will. The majority of the activity is going to be right in, right out at that curb cut. And we have to go to the county for approval anyway, so you can take some comfort that there's going to be another level of review with respect to that proposed curb cut. The other curb cuts along Gilbert, 102 parking spaces. That curb cut will serve. That's going to be a full access curb cut, allowing both left turns and right turns into and out of that portion of the parking garage. You cannot get between the 32 parking spaces that are served by Easton Avenue and the 102 parking spaces that will be served by Gilbert. There's no physical way internally in the garage to get between those two levels. With respect to those turning movements, based on our analysis, I do not foresee any issues with respect to traffic turning into and out of either of those curb cuts. I will tell you that right now there's 2 curb cuts along Easton Avenue that serve this overall property. It's essentially the 2 homes that I believe have 2 apartments in each of those homes. They have their own driveways. So we will be consolidating those existing curb cuts along Easton Avenue from 2 to 1 that's proposed. Certainly that is a benefit to not only the motoring public, but pedestrians that are walking along Easton Avenue. Rather than having 2 driveways to contend with, they would only have 1. There's also an existing driveway along Hamilton Street. There's basically an office building that comprises most of the site today. It's occupied. It generates traffic in and out of the Hamilton Street frontage via 1 curb cut. We're completely proposing to close that off. Again, another benefit both to the motoring public as well as pedestrians that walk up and down Hamilton Street. And we are proposing the Gilbert Street curb cut. I don't believe there's any curb cuts along Gilbert today, so we are introducing 1 new curb cut there. But again, that will serve the majority of the parking that's proposed. In my opinion, it's good to have that curb cut on the least busiest of streets that we front on. And I don't foresee any issues with respect to that curb cut. From the very conservative analysis we've done, the only quote-unquote real impact is to Gildan as it comes out to Hamilton Street. At times, traffic is busy along Hamilton Street, particularly during the morning and evening commutes. Our analysis shows that at most, at any given time, the amount of traffic that would be waiting on Gildan Street today would be increased by 1 additional car waiting to to turn onto Hamilton Street or come across the Hamilton Street intersection with this proposed project based on our conservative estimate of traffic, which again is an overestimation. And we did that intentionally to provide conservative analysis. So with that, I would be happy to answer other questions, or if you have
I
any.
have no further questions.
This might not be a question for you, but since you specified how the two areas are to be separate, will there be an elevator in both the areas to bring the residents up to the?
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess, let me just offer my 2 cents with respect to the variance we seek on parking. For all the reasons I've said, thus far, we anticipate vehicle ownership of the residents that are likely going to be students is going to be relatively low compared to a normal apartment renter for market rate apartments. I will leave it with this. I will tell you that our proposed parking supply is on the order of about 0.74, 0.75 spaces per unit. I'm personally working on, as well as the planner that you'll hear shortly, on a few projects in Hoboken. We've done a few projects in Jersey City as well. Probably a little more urban in terms of context than what we're talking about in terms of New Brunswick, but similar in terms of the availability of mass transit. In those projects, we've gotten parking supply ratios approved of 0.75 spaces per unit. So certainly what we're asking for in terms of the parking supply relief here is not out of the ordinary in terms of context with other projects elsewhere in New Jersey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, I would call Mr. Greg Woodruff for testimony.
Sir, can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name? please?
Sure, Greg Woodruff, last name spelled W-O-O-D-R-U-F-F.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
I do.
Mr. Woodruff, you are a licensed professional planner of the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
I am, as well as nationally with the American Institute of Certified Planners.
Okay. And in that capacity, you've been asked to review the various variances that are being requested this evening by the applicant.
I have.
I would ask if you could give the board the benefit of your professional qualifications and experience.
Certainly. So, as with any planning exercise of this nature, I'm sorry, you wanted me to give my qualifications first, sorry. Jumping a step ahead, I apologize. So, as mentioned, I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey as well as nationally with the American Institute of Certified Planners. I'm a senior project manager at Langen. I've testified before numerous boards, including in New Brunswick. I just can't recall if it was at the zoning board or the planning board for another project, one of the fraternities, doesn't matter, probably about 2 years ago.
So, excuse me, our attorney is saying yes.
I think it was
That was the nod, gotcha, right?
Yes.
Great.
So we will accept you as a.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Your credentials have not changed since
No.
about
No.
3 years ago, I believe.
Yes, yeah, 2-3 years ago is what I recall, so I already noticed.
If you could then, please, I'm going to allow you to go through your analysis with regard to the D variances first, and then with regard to the bulk variances, and provide your methodology, your review, the factors you took into consideration, and then if you could render an opinion with regard to those variances and the support that you have for that.
Certainly. So as with any planning analysis of this nature, you would start with the background documents, the submission documents, the underlying zoning ordinance. Of course, complete a visit to the site and the surrounding area. Spend quite a bit of time walking around the site and the surrounding area to try and get a feel for the area to render the opinion that you're going to hear tonight. So first, I think it's important just to refresh memories that the zone that we are in, the use is actually permitted, and really the only reason that we are here is that the nature of the height that's being requested and the FAR ratios are such that it requires zoning board review instead of those issues under certain circumstances can be before the planning board, but that's why we're here. So it's important, I think, from a planning perspective to keep in mind that the use is permitted and the building size and scale is really what puts us here at the zoning board and creates those 2D variances. So the first D variance that I'd like to talk about is the FAR exceedance as was referenced. 1.2 is permitted, 7.6 is being requested. You heard quite a bit of testimony about the context that was understood relative to this site. Its proximity to campus, it really being in this transitional zone between the more dense sort of urban core area of the city that's really tied to the university and that transition as you're working your way out Easton Avenue. The height was specifically sort of chosen to be a transition between some of those larger buildings that have come about in the last couple of years and have been so successful, and the lower buildings that are further out as you work your way out. So it's really intended from a planning perspective to create that transition, to still provide that density or tie and relate to that density from a planning perspective, but also be conscious that it needs to start to transition down to some buildings that aren't that same urban core height and density that you see working your way further along Easton Avenue toward the university. It's clear that, from that contextual analysis, while I don't have the specific FARs for some of those other buildings, this FAR that's being requested is not dissimilar to many of the FAR ratios that you're seeing in this neighborhood. And again, it's intended to be a transitional area, working your way away from those dense areas. Relative to that FAR brings density, right? So what are some of the mitigating factors from a planning perspective that would enable the site to really manage and deal with that FAR? We've heard about a number of the different transportation and people movement techniques that are incorporated into the project, from bicycle storage, bicycle sharing. Just to refresh the memory on some of those statistics, 160 stalls for bicycles for the tenants, the specific tenants of the building, and there's also going to be another 10, on the order of 10, 12 bike sharing units that someone who maybe doesn't own their own bicycle, who is storing it at the property, but might be able to just walk downstairs, pick up a bicycle, and then traverse throughout the city and the campus on this newly coming bicycle sharing network that is beginning. Also, there's a vehicle sharing station that will be right outside the building that will, again, sort of mitigate some of that density. It's a growing trend. I don't know that it's going anywhere anytime soon in terms of the way that people use the shared economy, but that's another way that you can sort of mitigate some of that density with modes of transportation. It's also important to note the bus lines, both public and campus-oriented bus lines that are either right on the property, there's a bus stop right at the corner there of Easton and Hamilton, or within a roughly 2-3 block walk. The number of bus lines, I think it's the 811 bus line has the stop right on the corner there, and I counted at least, there's 4 other bus lines within a 3-block radius that take you to more regional destinations. And then, as importantly for the target demographic in this location, there's that campus bus network, the significant Rutgers bus campus network. Again, within close proximity, you have that main hub bus stop on College Avenue to help deal with that density as it is coming out of the building and working its way back to campus in most cases. There's also, from a regional transportation perspective, there is the Amtrak and New Jersey Transit rail station, the New Brunswick rail station that is, on the order of 3-4 blocks away. If someone needs to get to a more regional destination, if that density needs to move in a more regional destination, has that ability as well. And importantly, at the core of all of this is that the design has really been designed in multiple ways to service a student population in proximity to the university campus, provide safer, more adequate housing in a slightly more controlled environment than students may be being forced to choose currently, going out into the surrounding neighborhoods. And really, so that density is not dissimilar to a lot of student housing options that exist. It's just hopefully a step up from that in terms of safety and some other measures. Relative to the height that's being requested, the standard here is really just that despite the height exceedance, the proposed project fits into the surrounding area. And again, this goes back to that theme of really trying to identify that transition. You heard the architect highlight a number of the architectural features that were specifically incorporated into the building to deal with mass, scale, height, and really be respectful of the transition down from some of those taller, more dense buildings at that more urban core university area and downtown area toward the neighborhood. So there's been quite a bit of care taken to not just have height, but height with some complexity from a design perspective to try and mitigate that. Just a couple of statistics. The 2 buildings that I think were probably the biggest reference points are the Yard and the Aspire building relative to height. We're requesting 115 feet. The Yard building, I believe we calculated out as 165 foot in terms of just the building itself. And obviously there's some interesting topography in the area, so when you factor in elevation of ground and then building, that's a whole different number. But just in terms of the actual building, this building would be 165 feet, the yard is 165. The Aspire is comparatively about 164 feet, I believe, based on the information we have, again, compared to 115 feet. Those buildings are clearly, again, more centrally located to the downtown, but we're trying to create that transition. You heard the architect also talk about the care that has been attempted to be made in terms of the overall feel of the streetscape areas and trying to tie this building really to the neighborhood, create that amenity space, have it be visible, have it activate Easton Ave right along here, moving some of these drive entrances around, so really trying to be mindful of how this building fits into the surrounding area, even though, again, understanding that it is requesting a height variance, but what else could be done and incorporated into the design of the building to really enmesh it within the neighborhood, in addition to those amenities that we talked about. Relative to both of those D variances, the proof standard does require proof that there's no substantial detriment to the public good. In both cases, I think there will not be a substantial detriment to the public good, as at the end of the day, the driver here is to really try to bring students into appropriately dense, but safer, little higher quality, amenitized buildings, rather than sort of sprawling out into the neighborhood as they might be currently, but provide that alternate housing option, similar to other housing options that are occurring in that more dense environment, and just transitioning it, because really that neighborhood is transitioned out here already, and it's trying to provide a building similar to what is in that more dense area, a little further out along Easton Ave. In my opinion, there's also no substantial impairment to the intent or purpose of the zone plan. The use is permitted in the zone. We're really here relative to the height issue and the FAR issue. And again, I think the applicant has taken some pretty significant strides to try to address those issues, deal with the FAR, as well as the height in terms of specific design characteristics. Relative to the bulk variances, I'll run through those and the justifications for those. Just how I'm going to use terminology. There's both as this board is well aware, the C1 and the C2 criteria for bulk variances. The C1 criteria being essentially the proof standard that there is some unique site attribute, essentially, that prevents compliance with whatever that bulk requirement is. The C2 criteria being that there's basically a balancing or a weighing test that would happen, and there would be clearly benefits achieved through the requested variance versus any detriments or perceived detriments. And in both cases, there still is that obligation to prove that there is no substantial detriment to the public good or substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the zone plan. So that's the same terminology I'll be using as we work our way through the bulk variances here. So the first two I'd like to lump together relative to the yard setbacks. You heard Mr. Roach identify the front yard setback variances that are being requested, as well as one specific point along that rear yard where there's a setback issue. In both cases here, relative to the front and the rear yard setback, in my opinion, from a planning perspective, I think these fall under the category of a C1 variance. And the uniqueness here is a couple things. The unique attribute that I think this site has, which is one of its benefits, but from the perspective of analyzing yards, is that it's completely fronted on three sides by streets. So you end up with a site that has 3 front yards. It's not typical that you find a site that has 3 front yards, and as a result of the site having 3 front yards, the 4th side, sort of by default, becomes the rear yard, not a side yard, which again is somewhat unique, that you wouldn't have a site that would have any side yard and would have 3 front yards. I think something else that's unique physically about this site is that when you look at the property line, in a lot of urban settings, that property line would be the curb line. That's not really the case on this site. That property line falls somewhere sort of mid right of way on the sidewalk, which means that technically on paper, the setback that is written compared to functionally the sidewalk area that's created in the streetscape and what that building really feels like it's set back from that curb line, which is, I think, what the layman would really perceive as sort of the edge, that public space edge that's creating the setback. It's just calculated differently, but functionally in the field, you would still perceive how wide is the sidewalk, and that's really, I think, what you would perceive to be the setback for that front yard. So in this case, as you heard Mr. Roach define, the sidewalk areas along Easton and Hamilton and even along Gilden are very typical for an urban streetscape setting in terms of the actual width of those areas. It's the calculation of the setback from the property line, because the property line isn't at the curb edge, that creates some of those smaller numbers that might on paper make you say, wow, that seems like it's really close, but it's close to a property line that isn't out at that street edge. So in my opinion, there's no substantial detriment to the public good because, again, that overall physical setback from a functional perspective exists. It's really about the technical nature of how that setback is calculated that creates the numbers that we're referring to. In my opinion, there's no substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the zone plan because, again, the purpose of these setbacks is to have the building come back from those functional, in my opinion, from a planning perspective, come back from those public right-of-way spaces. And that streetscape area that's being created is fully in keeping with a building of this type and the surrounding streetscape area. The next...
Excuse me, could I just interrupt you one second?
Yeah, of course.
Because you're referencing the width of the sidewalk. I don't know that Chris actually provided that testimony, and I believe you have it. Could you just put in the record what they are?
I believe Hamilton Street ends up on the order, we can scale it off, but they all end up on the order of about 20, a little over 20 feet in width from the curb line.
Right, the actual building face from the Easton Avenue curb line is under 20 feet back.
And what about Hamilton Street?
Yeah, generally the same.
They're all on the scale of that 20 feet width, which is a pretty typical city street width for sidewalk areas.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right. The next bulk variance or C variance that I'd like to address is the maximum building coverage. The ordinance requires or allows 50%, 80% is being proposed. In this case, I think that falls under the criteria of a C2 variance, whereby the benefits that are being achieved outweigh the detriments again. So in this case, again, this building is a transitioning urban, more dense zone working its way from that core area out. So it would make sense that this building would be more of a classic urban building that would feel like a lot line type of building. It's also interesting to note that the existing building and the existing building on the site has an adjacent surface parking lot. So from an urban streetscape design perspective, it really is the trend in an urban setting to pull that parking within the structure to create more streetscape building edge rather than surface parking lots. So you still are providing parking, it's just been pulled within the building, but that then creates more building coverage on the lot because you've essentially put the parking under your building, not had it as a surface lot adjacent to it. So from an overall coverage perspective, which is the next variance we'll get to, the overall coverage of the lot is very in line with what the allowance is. It really just has to do with the fact that from a current urban streetscape and urban building design, that parking has been brought within the building and just creates a slightly larger building. It's also important to note that while there is more building, and you'll hear in a second, slightly more overall impervious coverage than the code permits, the stormwater management system that's being incorporated in the project will actually mean that there is less stormwater leaving the site in the future condition than does currently. So again, it's one of those benefits of an overall update to the site and bringing it up to sort of current engineering and design standards. You get a stormwater management system that's going to mitigate the stormwater leaving the site to a less impactful level than it exists today. So in my opinion, there's no substantial detriment to the public good because even though the building has a larger building coverage percentage than is allowed, you're getting quite a number of amenities. You're getting sort of an upgrade from an urban design perspective in that parking now comes inside the building. Overall, you're getting a better streetscape aesthetic overall around the building, activated streetscape space that currently is not along Easton Ave, which is obviously a main commercial corridor and artery for the city. So overall, I think those benefits outweigh any detriments or perceived detriments. And relative to the intent and purpose of the zone plan, again, I would argue that there is no substantial impairment due to the fact that the zone plan and the zoning clearly is identifying in the core area uses just like this, and this is just transitioning those uses further out Easton Ave. I promised we would talk about impervious coverage. The code allows 90%. We are requesting 92%, which in my estimation on a site of this size is a de minimis amount. It equates to, I think, 750 square feet, something on that order. From a percentage, it's obviously 2% over the allowable level. In a highly urbanized setting like you have here, those are pretty typical numbers, what you see on sites in terms of the overall maximum impervious area. And again, as I mentioned before, one of the benefits of the updated engineering design for the site is that even though you're going to have more impervious coverage than is permitted, you're getting an updated stormwater management system that's going to actually result in less stormwater runoff leaving the site than does so today. So relative to, or because of those factors, I don't believe there's any substantial detriment to the public good or impairment to the intent and purpose of the zone plan. Again, 90% versus 92%, it's a de minimis value that really just has to do with how things specifically lay out on a site of this nature. Lastly, relative to the C variances is the number of parking spaces. We heard quite a bit of testimony from Mr. Pisario from a traffic perspective relative to this parking spaces. Just to reissue those statistics, clearly per what would be calculated by the code versus what's being proposed, God bless you, there are less parking spaces being proposed than the calculations would indicate. But it's important to note where those calculations come from. Mr. Roach touched on it. He promised I would talk a little bit more about it. The residential site improvement standards are really, they're statewide standards, large-scale standards that cover a number of different jurisdictions. They don't and aren't intended to take into account what the setting of the project site is. There's even a section of the RSIS standards that specifically states local jurisdictions have the ability to apply local conditions and local settings to essentially issue an exception to the requirements, the RSIS requirements, so that it can take those localized conditions into consideration. So some of those considerations are important because, again, because the RSIS standards cover rural, suburban, urban, all environments, there are really impactful planning factors for this site that would really lead you down the path, as Mr. Desario had talked about the fact that you will not need that amount of parking for this project. Just to refresh some of those statistics, first, the applicant has taken the step of confirming they have 50 available vehicle parking spaces at a nearby parking authority facility if they were to need them. Second, we heard testimony about the car sharing space that's already part of the design. We've heard about the significant number of resident or tenant bicycle storage facilities that will be part of the project, as well as the bicycle sharing program. Layer on top of that all of the mass transit that's in proximity to the site, and you really start to see the picture of a property that's going to have tenants who are not going to be focused on owning their own vehicle in this facility, most likely. So from a planning perspective, you can see how all those factors would play in to allowing you to consider them as you evaluate that parking number relative to the RSIS standards. A factor that we hadn't talked about before, but I think from a planning perspective is worth mentioning, and it can be somewhat difficult to quantify, but I don't think anyone would argue that it's not a factor, is the impact of services like Uber and Lyft on people's habits relative to car travel as well. It's not uncommon in an environment like this for people to Uber pretty frequently. They wouldn't even think of maybe bringing a car to their college environment because they know between their bicycle, mass transit, and Uber, they can get to everywhere they need to be, essentially. So I think that's important to factor in here. And again, this property is being marketed to that college student demographic. So in my opinion, there's no substantial detriment to the public good. Obviously, the public would benefit by not having structured parking built that isn't necessary. There's nothing that can kill a downtown more than having to finance parking spaces that aren't necessarily needed in a project. So really trying to focus on those mass transit options and those alternate forms of transportation in a facility like this is a better investment for the project. And in my opinion, there's no substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the zone plan. Obviously, parking standards are to make sure that the parking is right for a project, and we think with all the factors that play in on a facility like this, that has happened. Obviously, this board is very familiar with the yard. I don't believe they provided any parking spaces, correct, for that entire project. And, you know, based on my understanding and sort of observing how it functions, it doesn't seem like there's issues. You know, it's just, it functions, people are walking, people are bicycling, you can still find parking spaces in that area, and there's not issues. So I think that would be sort of, from a planning perspective, the proof is in the pudding, I guess, to a certain extent. So in closing, the site redevelopment is a permitted use in a dense urban area of the city. There's been quite a number of precedents that this project is transitioning from and using as contextual markers for how it was designed and how it functions. The site clearly has some unique features that have presented challenges in complying with some of the bulk requirements within the zoning ordinance. There's also some clear benefits that outweigh any detriments or perceived detriments on some other of the bulk variances. In my opinion, I think that the most appropriate purpose of the municipal land use law that this overall application and the variances really speak to is purpose I, to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. We've talked quite a bit about what those civic design factors were as part of the project's overall inception and design, and I think it really has been thought through in that way. So in my opinion, the requested variances have met the proof standards, are justified, and can be granted.
That's all I have, Mr. Woodruff, and that does complete our presentation.
Does anybody have any questions for us? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now is the time that we'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak to this application? Over.
Can you raise your right hand, state your name, and spell your last name for me, sir?
My name is Steve Schilling, S-H-I-L-L-I-N-G.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes, sir. I own property at 160 Hamilton Street. Have owned the property since 1987 as an apartment building for students. It seems like a really attractive project. My primary concern is parking. Parking is already an issue in the area. I think I heard that none of the folks in this building would have the ability to get on-street parking permit,
Correct.
which is beneficial. But if I do my math correctly, it sounds like there's 578 bedrooms for 134 parking spots. I might have done my math wrong.
That's approximately correct.
Okay. And I don't know how many folks are in a bedroom. It does seem like a lot of parking being added into the community. On the second point, I'm a little conflicted on the density because as a homeowner and a property owner, I kind of like that density. But I would take my concern back to the amount of parking that's going to be available and that the community can support that level of parking. So, and to that end, I hope that the board very carefully considers the impact on the community and the ability to continue to serve folks that have been here for a while. I'm not sure that preliminary and final approval is necessary in the first evening. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public? Charlie?
Charlie, can you raise your right hand, state your name, and spell your last name for me, please?
K-R-A-T-O-V-I-L.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And I have a special place in my heart for St. Louis. My grandfather lived there. And my heart, though, I'm sure you guys all know, is in New Brunswick. And so I agree that local conditions and local settings should be taken into account with any project, certainly of this magnitude. And I do know this neighborhood well. So just to put it in perspective, the existing building is how tall? 3 stories, right?
Sure.
Okay. So in the current condition, within, let's say, a 1-block radius, is the existing 3-story building the tallest building?
In it.
No.
No.
What's taller in a 1 block radius?
In a 1 block radius, the Aspire,
The Aspire would be over here.
1 block away.
Well, more than a block. This would be a 1 block radius, and then you've got this out-of-place skyscraper
No.
called the Aspire.
You just pointed to the end.
There are 4- and 5-story buildings directly across the street on Easton Avenue.
Yes, that's true.
Right, there's Century Apartments and,
That's not right, that's not.
okay, so those are
There are 2 apartment buildings there that are mid-rise, 4- or 5-story buildings.
4 or 5 stories. Okay, so 9 stories would be double, or more than double, the tallest building in a 1 block
Maybe
radius.
less than double if one of them is 5.
You sure it's
I
5?
know you're a journalist.
You sure it's 5?
It's 4 or 5.
Okay, I just know one of the first floors is kind of in the basement, so it's more like 4. But either way, this would be double, about double the tallest. So it's, I just don't agree with the representation that it'll blend in with all these other tall buildings in the area. It's not the case.
Well, actually, the Gateway is only about a block away also.
Gateway would be two blocks down, and it's fairly stands out. Let's say it's bigger than all the rest of the
And
buildings.
the yard is a block away. The yard.
And the yard.
And the yard would be just over a block away, yes, 15 stories, also very out of place, very much taller than the surrounding buildings, is the point I'm trying to make, and that's all I want to make. It was stated, I believe, that a bus stop currently exists at Easton and Hamilton. Can anybody tell me what bus stop that is at Easton and Hamilton?
I don't believe there's a stop right there, but the bus runs along Easton Avenue.
So there's no stop at the corner of Easton and Hamilton, correct?
I have no idea.
Okay, I heard testimony that there was. I want to set the record straight. There's no bus stop, bus shelter at Easton and Hamilton. Is there any bus stop on Easton Avenue? Any Rutgers bus stop on Easton Avenue?
There are bus stops on Easton Avenue.
Are they in the Rutgers University system, since everybody here is going to be a college student supposedly?
I have no idea.
The Rutgers shuttle bus does service that area. They
Oh, it
have
does.
stops on
That's true.
Hamilton, farther up on
On
Easton.
Easton by St. Peter's Hospital. And
And also on
yes,
Hamilton.
yes, it does, that's true.
It's
So-
2 blocks from the main bus routes for Rutgers.
Okay, right, so it's not, so none of the main bus routes run on Easton Avenue, only this shuttle. And does it stop anywhere on this, like say this section of Easton Avenue, the section depicted here?
Yep, well, the bus, I believe, I could be wrong, that the campus bus does run on Hamilton Street. Yes, I believe behind it.
Hamilton Street further down, makes
Right.
it makes a left off college.
Right, but it does, but that's Hamilton Street coming up.
Right, are there any stops?
No, but it's a block, that is a block away from where they would go to stop, I believe.
I'm not sure what point Mr. Credible is trying to make. It was a 2-block walk to bus routes is actually very excellent transportation access. The point of a bus route is that it doesn't go up to everybody's house. You walk a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just trying to,
Issue, Madam Chair, if I may. The public can certainly ask questions of the applicant, but it seems as though he's asking questions of the board members.
Which I have no idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not sworn testimony the board members are giving, so you may have an opinion, but Mr. Cradaville may want to direct his questions or comments to the applicant.
sure, I'd like to.
And if they'd like to answer the question, that's up to them.
Can the last witness tell me, about the bus stop situation? You mentioned there was a bus stop at Easton and Hamilton.
Sure, so on the New Jersey, we obviously pulled the mapping for various mass transit services in the area, and there is a bus stop symbol there for the New Jersey Transit bus line. I believe it's the 811 bus line is what's shown on their mapping.
So according to NJ Transit, you can catch the 811 where? Here?
I believe it would, again, the symbols are, but it's at the corner of Easton and Hamilton.
Okay, but there's no shelter or any accommodations, that is just a sign maybe?
When I was out there, I don't recall seeing a shelter. No, I think it was probably just a sign stop.
And so the major bus stop that was referenced at College Avenue and Hamilton Street, is there a shelter at that bus stop, or is it just sort of a...
There's no shelter there now, there was a shelter there previously. Rutgers is in talks, and in talks for the next 6 to 12 months, so potentially add a shelter. There's currently some ongoing construction on College Avenue, they're redoing the bike lanes, they're putting in a bus lane. I think upon the completion of that, they will start to look more thoroughly at a bus shelter location.
I hope so, because I am shocked that they got rid of that bus shelter and haven't replaced it. It's ridiculous that the most utilized bus stop in the entire Rutgers transit system doesn't have a shelter there. It's crazy, and so I think that some of the points that...
You should go before Rutgers and talk to them about that.
I will, I give them a hard time too, but I gotta be honest, the developers are coming in here saying it's easy to get buses, and I think either they might not have the right information, or they
Madam
might...
Chairman, I just want to point out for the record, there is a bus stop designated in front of the building.
Okay.
There you go.
So I've literally never seen a bus stop there, I've never seen anybody getting on the bus there. And quite frankly, college students don't need the 811. That's not what, they're not trying to go to wherever that goes, North Brunswick Shopping Center, that, sometimes maybe, but the college students benefit mostly from the Rutgers bus system.
I don't want to make the applicant's point here on this, but the distance from this property to the College Avenue bus routes isn't any different than if you were over in the quads on the College Avenue campus and a lot of other places. I mean, Mr. Crowell can make a point about what the access is and so forth. I'm not getting the impression that this is bad transit access. There's good transit access for everybody to weigh and so forth. Mr. Crowell can make his points and so forth. But just so we get a clear picture of how it all works together, it's 2 blocks.
Thank you.
Absolutely correct. Let me tell you where I'm going with this. I know previously the zoning boards approved one project, where one of the things the developer did was they agreed to build a bus shelter so that the Rutgers bus system could have a place where people could wait and catch that shuttle bus on Lewis Street. I believe it was this board, just 6 months ago or a year ago. Yeah, about a year ago. And so I don't know what's happened with that. I haven't seen a shelter spring up or a building spring
They
up
haven't
there.
built a project. They
Okay,
haven't built
yeah.
a project.
I understand, I'm saying, I'm not aware of what the status
Charlie,
is.
you'll be here for years. Just be patient. I'm sure it's going to get built eventually.
Well, I hope so, and I just hope that the developer would consider putting in a bus shelter here, whether it's for the 811, or maybe could coordinate with Rutgers and get Rutgers to have their bus route service this building that's going to have 500 beds. Just makes sense to me, right?
We're talking Rutgers.
I know they need to be at the table if they're. I don't think it's fair for them to get the benefit of saying, oh, it's got buses and the Rutgers bus system serves it and everything.
The applicants
Would your
does-
client consider putting in the standard New Jersey Transit bus shelter out there and maintaining it?
Absolutely. But we will not build Rutgers' bus shelter because the bus line is there already. You should go to their Board of Governors meetings, which you do regularly, and complain about it.
Bringing the Rutgers
They
bus
have
line
less
over
public
here would
access.
not be of service to all of the 6 million users of that bus system to
No.
make a detour like that for this. They're 2 blocks away, but Mr. Cradwell's point about adding a bus shelter, I think it's a
Absolutely.
pretty good point.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I hope that somebody can pursue that, and the developer would be a
I
welcome
think
partner
they're
to
just
get
agreeing.
it.
We will agree to pursue that.
To pursue that.
Excellent, thank you. I'll move on. The bike, I heard bike share might be something you collaborate with Rutgers on?
Yes.
That's excellent. What would the contribution of the developer be? Would it be the space?
Yes, the space and to build the actual racks, whatever they are.
Physical racks? How about the car share? I heard that the car share will be on Gilden Street. So what does the developer bring to the table as far as that?
Builds and maintains.
Built what? Parking
Well, whatever-
space?
Yeah, essentially,
But it would be on street, no?
correct.
So what would the developer be doing?
Well, it would also be responsible to police it, assuming that there's a Title 39 agreement that the city would want us to enter into,
Okay.
to make so that it's always open for that purpose and it's not being privately used by someone.
And where would the space come from? It would be an existing on-street spot that would be taken away and made a permanent car share space.
Correct.
And has the city council approved such a change?
Not yet, no, it'll be a conditional approval.
They've approved it at other locations near the campus.
Okay, again, similarly, I don't think that that's a adequate mitigation for the parking issue, because they're taking away a parking space to do it, and it's not theirs to take away. Car share is a nice idea. Maybe if they used one of the spaces inside their deck, that would be something to say, hey, we're legitimately offering a space. You can't take a space away from the public and say, we're doing you a favor by creating a car share space in what used to be a public parking space. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I hear what you're saying, but they're also.
The other way of looking at this is that by providing it on street, it provides it not only for the residents of this proposed building, but other residents of the neighborhood. As I know Mr. Credible said, there are some parking issues.
And they're also giving up their permanent parking spaces,
So it wouldn't be possible to do it in the deck and have others from outside be able to come in.
It's not practical.
To me, like, the deck is gonna be for safety issues, they're gonna have a key fob to go in, you can't go in and out, so I would not, personally, my opinion would be that's not a good idea.
And that's not what's being proposed.
Okay, I just want to understand. Point out as far as Uber and Lyft are concerned, as much as they may be a legitimate mitigation, according to the city law department, they're illegal and not supposed to be operating within the city, is my understanding.
Mr. Credible is incorrect on that, as the state of New Jersey has passed legislation that prohibits municipalities from regulating car share services such as Uber and Lyft, and they're legal in New Jersey.
So the law department's changed their opinion as a result of this
No, the
state
law department hasn't changed its opinion, the state changed the law recently.
Okay. And hopefully, therefore, the law department changed their opinion.
But with all due respect, Mr. Credible, even when the law department did change their opinion, people used them.
Of course. Yeah, no disagreement there.
Stop people from using them.
I heard that it was mentioned that the gateway parking deck will offer 50 spaces, up to 50 spaces to tenants of this building. Has agreed to do that. Can you tell me, is the gateway deck ever at capacity?
I would have no idea.
Mr. Karen indicate that
It's
at all?
my understanding in my talking to Mr. Karen that he has the capacity to provide 50 spaces to us.
Okay. It's just, interesting, because dealing with other development projects, I've heard the claim that we need to build more parking in downtown because, we don't have enough. Well, this is a 656 space deck that apparently we've got 50 spaces to spare, according to the parking authority director's letter, which.
You would have to go to the parking authority and ask them that question.
Okay, I would think you should limit the amount of weight you put on that letter if he's not here to defend it and can't say whether or not the deck ever fills up, because if the deck fills up, then these 50 people aren't getting their spaces that day.
It sounded to me like that would be as an as-needed basis, and that they would be paying for those spots, so that would be an issue they'd have to take up with the parking authority if need be.
Correct. They would be monthly passes that people would buy individually. If they cook it in the garage, I'm sure they'd be making phone calls.
Correct, yeah, I would.
Right. Okay. One of the final points I want to make is that this intersection in particular, where Gilden becomes Hardenberg Street, is a really kind of dangerous intersection, and I envision it becoming much more dangerous with a brand new parking deck right here opening up. So basically there's two parking decks that are disconnected from one another, is my understanding. Can you tell me which is the bigger one, the one on Easton or the one on Gilden? So the Gilden one will be much bigger, 132 spaces.
102 spaces.
102, I'm sorry. So 102 vehicles will be now parking in this one curb cut, and there'll be apparently a new car share vehicle out there. And all these folks will be using this intersection at different times. I am very concerned about the safety of this intersection in its present state. I'm sure Mr. Kelso knows maybe even more about it than I do because he's been in the neighborhood longer. But what can we do about this intersection? Would the developer be willing to agree to have a traffic signal there? Is it an intersection that's worthy of a traffic
The
signal?
answer is no. Our traffic testimony was pretty clear about the volume that's expected as a result of this project being completed.
I know.
And it doesn't justify it, and the level of service didn't change based on this testimony.
And what is the level of service now?
It depends on what approach you're talking about. In terms of eastbound approach during peak hours in the morning is a D and evening is
D and E.
Correct.
So that's already pretty bad, right?
are not atypical for urban setting, and in particular around the Brunswick. And because of those levels of service, it's indicative of delay, not necessarily safe or unsafe.
Okay, I think it's a, both of these intersections, quite frankly, because of the angle that they're at, they are dangerous intersections. This one would vastly benefit from having a signal there, if you're gonna put a 9-story building next to it. If you're not gonna put a building there, maybe it can continue with the current condition, but what I'm hearing is the current condition is D or E. I don't think it gets much lower than F. So, putting a 9-story building here, we've got a D-E intersection, maybe it's gonna be an EF if you build this building. So, I would seriously consider making it a condition that the developer pay for the required traffic signals for this intersection. The developers always come and say, oh, it's gonna be a minimal impact. They always say that. What I'm telling you is, it's already a D or an E, and they're gonna put a 102 space parking deck there.
I don't think it's that easy to just put a traffic signal up at the place. I think that would,
And putting a traffic signal that doesn't make an intersection safer.
yeah, that's true.
Generally, the most dangerous intersections are the ones with the traffic signals at them. One of the traffic signals cause cars to speed up to get through the light before it changes red. It creates more congestion as the cars back up, and there is a signal a block away. It's not necessarily a good situation, so you can't make that premise that putting a signal there is going to make the intersection safe.
Well,
And the way I look at it, Charlie, is people coming out of that deck, I think most people are gonna make a right. Because if I was coming out of that deck, I'd make a right. I wouldn't even try to make a left.
sure. I mean, you can still get hit making it right. It's a already existing current condition is not good. Adding more to it is going to be trouble. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, there's probably not a lot of crashes that happen on dirt roads. If we made all the roads dirt roads, it doesn't mean they're going to be safe. The point is, when you're building up, one of the things you need to do is build up the infrastructure that surrounds the development you're doing. And one way to do that is to upgrade the intersections. So what maybe once was a dirt road is a paved road, and then it gets a stop sign, and then eventually, when you build a 9-story building next to it, you got to build a traffic signal. And I know it's expensive, and I know that's why the developer probably doesn't want to sign on to it, but I think it'd be in the best interest of the community and ultimately the developer and their own tenants, if this building gets built, to have a traffic signal or at least some improvements to that intersection. Something's got to be done there if you're going to build a 9-story building. I just common sense dictates that. I'll finish up. I just want to find out the rents at the building. Probably has the rents been decided on?
Right now, there would only be an estimate, because that's still to be determined. It's 2 years down the road. It'll be market.
Okay. And geared towards college students, but anyone can live there?
Yes.
Okay, I would suggest that, you know, as much as you've heard testimony that college students don't have cars, don't need cars, if the rents are expensive, you're going to get the type of tenant that can afford a car, does want a car, and I think 578 beds should give you some pause. I didn't realize, you know, I'll be honest, my jaw dropped when I heard 9 stories. I thought, wow, 9 stories for this spot is much taller than what I thought was going to be proposed tonight, and you know, it's my fault for not looking into it, but I'll be honest, when you add it all up and it's 578 bedrooms, or you know, something on that order, and only 134 parking spaces, I think it's going to add to the parking crunch. I think we need creative solutions. I think, you know, if Gateway has extra space in it and they're willing to help, that's a positive thing. But I just personally think that the retail is going to bring people as well, and there's no accommodation made for that. Since you've got the 2 decks, which is an unusual arrangement, perhaps one of the decks should be to accommodate the retail and potentially some of the other surrounding visitor parking. And maybe the building should be downsized. Maybe it shouldn't be 9 stories tall and 181 units. I mean, I think that it should be scaled down to accommodate for a less, you know, less fierce impact on the parking. It's already bad. This is the epicenter. You're sandwiched between Robert Wood and Rutgers. And just the last point I'll make is it was referenced the yard. It got away with not having any parking. They got away with that because they lied and said they were going to build a parking deck as part of the project, and the parking deck got nixed eventually. They didn't build the parking deck. I don't know that the planning board would have approved it if that wasn't part of the plan, which was stated, there's documents, it was very clear.
Having handled that application, that is absolutely not what occurred.
There was never a parking deck plan for
There
George
was
Street.
absolutely a parking deck that was approved. It had nothing to
What happened
do
with
with
the
the
parking deck
contingent.
plan? Was it built?
Rutgers changed the plan. It doesn't have anything to do with.
Rutgers had a plan to build a parking deck over on George Street, many blocks away from where the yard is. And it had nothing to do with the yard and its parking. It was a Rutgers facility for staff and so forth. And they nixed that plan. It did not have anything to do with the yard.
Could be argued that it would have increased the supply of parking in that neighborhood, and it was presented as a redevelopment initiative that involved multiple buildings, including the parking deck. The parking deck was the only one that didn't get built, is the facts of that particular matter. And so I think that, that example should not necessarily weigh heavily on you that this is going to be just like the yard, and they got away with it, so these guys should too.
No.
I think that...
That's not what we're saying, Charlie. I don't like it when you misrepresent that. It functions. The yard has over 400 residents, and there's no parking, and it functions beautifully. And I'm on that street every day, and you are too. And you can't tell me that it doesn't work.
I'm not saying that the yard doesn't work. What I'm saying is that this is going to have even more people living in it, right?
And it's got a lot more parking than the yard does. No, it's not. It's marginally more. It's marginally more.
Okay, I mean, 578, you said over 400 in the yard. This is even bigger than the yard, which is a huge change for the neighborhood. Listen, I think it's good that there's going to be some housing here, but I don't know that this is the right plan, and I think that perhaps the board should, think twice about approving all these serious variances when, you might have some time to work with the developer a little more and, make a building that is going to be a better complement to the existing neighborhood. Nothing against people who want to come to New Brunswick and invest. God bless you, but I do think that the plans could be improved, be made better before they're approved, and I hope you'll allow for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone? Yes, please come forward.
So can you raise your right hand, state your name, and spell your last name, please?
Cord, Brody, B-R-O-D-Y.
And do you sort of tell the whole truth in this matter?
Yes, I do. All right, so my name's Cord. I own this house here on 1 Gilman, all right? So my concerns are everything that has been talked about. I'll start with this intersection here of Gilden and Hamilton. If you hang around the corner like I do, there's always screeching of tires, accidents, a mess over in this intersection. My house here, I have 8 occupants. Maybe have 6 to 8 cars for the last 18 years that I've owned the house. So I guess what I'm concerned with, so my driveway holds 3 cars and my tenants park on the street of Gilden. So I imagine I'm going to be losing some of the spots that they were parking on from the corner of Hamilton to my house on 1 Gilden. 100 new cars coming into Gilden Street a day is going to be a lot. Or at least 100 cars into the lot. Especially if they make a right-hand turn, they're just coming into a town, into a narrow street of Gilden. It's kind of ridiculous. Many times my driveway is blocked because there's such a crunch for parking. So my tenants can't even come out. So again, there's a good chance that, the entranceway to your parking garage will be blocked. I guess the other concern is this height thing. If my building's 35, 40 feet high, I mean this thing's going to be over 100. So I think there was some lighting issues into my bedrooms.
I think they spoke to that.
Yeah,
The lights on that side are very.
Sure, but still.
And that they were going to put shrubbery there.
There's shrubbery already right there. So it's really, again, I think it's a crazy entrance way and exit way on the Gilden Street side because of the mess it is already.
It's hard to make these turns when there's cars close because of all the cars on this side, on the opposite side. So if you have a big car trying to maneuver, making a right or a left onto Gilden is going to be hard. Other than that, I think it's a beautiful project. I mean, it's just, it's unfortunate that the project didn't come into my house, maybe, a little bit. Because now I have to look at this silly thing that's going to tower over this house that I had for 18 years. So I don't really feel it's fair. I don't think it's going to be fair for my tenants. You know, the one thing the last 18, 20 years when I've rented, the first thing they really ask me is there parking? Can I park? I have to go to work. These people have to go to work. So what they do is they find parking, and yeah, they may Uber. A lot of my tenants will Uber because they're late to class, okay? They don't want to move their car, they don't want to take a bus. So they just Uber right to class. But they don't want to give up these spots because they're hard to come by. The only time they really move their cars is when they go to work or opposite parking on certain days. But other than that, I think that's all I got to say. But it is the parking. Parking and the height of the building is a problem for me, owning this house for the last 18 years. All right? Thanks.
Please come forward.
Can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name, please?
My name is Jill Lewis Spector. The last name is spelled Lewis hyphen Spector.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Sorry?
Do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes. First of all, I actually came tonight to talk about another application. Is it okay if I mention something about this one? Okay. So, looking at this, I'm pretty sure that last weekend I was trying to cross the street here. I think Thomas Sweet is down there.
Yes, correct.
You could not get across the street. It was almost impossible. And I'm concerned about the foot traffic. I know the cars are a problem. I know parking's a problem. But we're adding hundreds of people trying to cross the street over here. And it was really, really dangerous. I was with my husband, and a lot of people were trying to cross the street on the weekend, many of them trying to get to Thomas Sweet. And it was really, really difficult. So I don't know what can be done with the city in terms of the traffic lights and, you know, adjusting things, but it was really, really risky.
There is a traffic light where you just went.
There is a traffic light. There is a traffic light, but there's a lot of foot traffic. And this was on a weekend. This was not even, you know, when a lot of kids go home for the weekend. So I just think that that's something that needs to be
There's
considered.
a lot of foot traffic, it's fully signalized, there's push buttons, and much of the problem you probably saw is because a lot of the people who walk across are not paying attention because they're looking at their phones.
I assure you we paid attention. I assure you, and I didn't see anybody looking at their phones.
Well, because
We were
I sit
looking at
in the
each
window
other.
right in that corner, I see it every day.
We were looking at each other, trying to figure out how do we get across the street.
Well, I do have to tell you, there's a law in New Jersey that says if there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk, cars have to stop. And the police have been, the New Brunswick police, have been on Easton Avenue enforcing that. Trust me.
Yes.
I trust you. All I'm saying is we're going to be adding hundreds of people trying to cross that street, and given my experience from last weekend, it's dangerous. So, that's all.
This
Thank you.
application is also being reviewed by the county, so if there were to be a problem or a perceived problem, that would be discussed with the county at a later date.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, we'll close the public section. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay.
Madam Chair, if the board wants to make a positive recommendation on the application, I would suggest the following conditions. Compliance with terms of the DNR engineering report dated June 26, 2017, submission of all necessary easements and access agreements for review and approval by the board attorney and city engineer prior to filing of same. Payment of a site performance bond, an amount to be reviewed and approved by the city engineer. Submission of a site inspection escrow deposit for engineering inspection fees, an amount to be calculated pursuant to 1624-160. Payment of all water and sewer connection fees pursuant to Title 1304 and 1308. Issuance of a road opening permit from the city engineer if required. Compliance with the terms of Bignell Consulting Group report dated June 22nd, 2017. Mandatory monetary contribution to the city's tree preservation trust fund, amount to be required by Title 8.48. Planning review escrow, funding for all anticipated post-approval reviews, payment of any other fees to the city of Brunswick related to development or use of the project, payment of all outstanding taxes and water and sewer fees, Middlesex County Planning Board approval, DNR Canal Commission approval or waiver, Freehold Soil Conservation District approval, filing a lot consolidation deed, submit engineering site plan to comply with any changes required by the planning or engineering memos or planning amendments offered at the hearing, submit architectural plans to comply with any changes required by the planning or engineering memos or plan amendments offered at the hearing, voluntary waiver of the right of occupants to residential and business on-street parking permits. The applicant will provide a bus shelter on Easton Avenue, and the applicant will provide updating landscaping plans to address the landscaping concerns that the board brought up on the west side of the building.
Madam Chair, also, I'm sorry.
Yep.
There was also an indication that they would provide Title 39 enforcement authority as well. That would be a condition.
Okay.
And you know what, I just thought of one other question. In the parking garage, is there a key fob then to use the elevator to go upstairs so that no one can just walk in there and get on the elevator?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve with said conditions.
I'll second.
Evan Moscona,
Yes.
Doug Sheehan,
Yes.
John Zimmerman,
Yes.
Ivan Adorno,
Yes.
Yes.
Sue McElligott, John Cox,
Yes.
Nancy Cabola.
Yes.
Thank you very much, members of the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
For your indulgence.
Chris. Leave all the ones that you
I'm back on the record now. Everyone wants to quiet down?
Okay, our second application is St. Peter's Healthcare System Incorporated, Z2017-06, a sign variance application for the property located at 215 Eastern Avenue, Block 82, Lot 12.01, zoning district H.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there anyone, does anyone on the board have any conflicts for this application? Okay, we're good.
Great, thank you. My name is Sandy Galascio. I'm an attorney with Windells, Marks, Lane, and Mittendorf. On behalf of the applicant, St. Peter's Healthcare System, Inc. St. Peter's is a tenant at this building at 215 Easton. They operate a cancer center at that facility. It's an existing building, has been there for quite a while. St. Peter's is interested in putting a facade sign on the Easton Avenue facade of this building. The main entrance to the building is not on Easton, it's on Senior Street, where there's a small parking lot in the back. There's currently no identification of the building or the occupant on Easton Avenue except for the number of the building in the corner. We're here tonight, we're not seeking site plan approval, it's just for two sign variances. The first is to allow an internally illuminated sign where such signs are not permitted, and for maximum sign area. Where 24 square feet is permitted, we're proposing 125 square feet. So the sign is visible to vehicular traffic on Easton Avenue. I have two witnesses. I have Mr. Dennis O'Hara from the sign company to provide testimony about the particulars of the sign, and I have Eileen Benier from Mazer who will give the planning testimony. So without further ado, I'm going to call my first witness, Mr. Dennis O'Hara.
Thank you.
Sir, can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please?
Dennis O'Hara, capital O, apostrophe, capital H-A-R-A.
Do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
I do, sir.
Mr. O'Hara is just going to be a fact witness. He's not an engineer, so he's not being qualified as an expert, but I just wanted to go through his background so you could have the benefit of his business experience in this field. Can you just describe your business background, Mr. O'Hara, in
Yes.
this particular field?
I've been in the sign industry for 47 years. Last 24 years as Senior Vice President of NW Sign Industries, located in Morristown, New Jersey. And about 5 years ago, we worked with the hospital, partnered with them on creating a new brand for their hospital campus on Easton Avenue. All the exterior signs, freestanding wayfinding signs were all modified per the brand that we created. And in fact, just this past January on the H-Wing and the CARES building, all new signs similar to what we're proposing here were installed. What we tried to do, if I may say.
Before you get started, Mr. O'Hara is going to be referring to the exhibits that you already have in your packet. One exhibit is the sign exhibit from here, and the other one is an exhibit prepared to show the illumination at the property boundary. So we'll be showing this one first.
Yes, it should be drawing 16-62457-04. As the attorney said, we're proposing a 5-foot by 25-foot internally illuminated sign. It is will be fabricated from heavy gauge aluminum. The background of the sign, both the blue background and the brushed aluminum background, will be opaque. No light will transmit through it. The lettering will be routed out and pushed through the metal face a 1/2 inch. And at night, it's going to look like individual letters on the building because the background is not illuminated. There will be LED illumination, as I stated. We also will be providing a 20% diffuser to diffuse the light that comes through. We did some testing at our shop on a similar sign, put it in the paint booth, turned off all the lights, used a light meter, and with it, in our drawing on the site plan and the overhead view of the Google Earth view, we're less than 5 feet. There's 0 light transmission at the ground. The building also has a nice mulch bed and landscaping in the front of the building, which will absorb most of the light. There is one light source along the street frontage. I guess it's a PSE&G light to the left of where the sign is going on the building. And there's also a small little floodlight above the entry door, which I don't think is an entry door for the public, that will shed some light. Again, I want to stress that 50% of the sign area is opaque. No light comes through that. And it's a continuation of the brand that's at the hospital campus so that people will readily recognize that this Can Center is part of St. Peter's. And we can now refer to the other submissions that we put in. The Google map, which shows a white dotted line, which is where the light will become 0, and that's 5 foot from the face of the building. The setback of the building to the property line is 9 foot 4 inches. There will be actually no light at the property line. Another is a site plan prepared by Casey and Keller, which verifies that the setback is 9.40 inches, or excuse me, 9 foot 4 inches to the property line from the building. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'll note that one more thing, Mr. O'Hara. On the engineer's comment letter, comment 5.1 asked if the application would adhere to the requirements of section 11 of the city's engineering utility and landscape standards pertaining to lighting. Did you have an opportunity to look through those standards, sir?
Yes, I did.
And did you identify any standards that would be violated by this application?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. My next witness will be the planner.
your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please.
Yes. It's Eileen Benira. It's B-A-N-Y-R-A. First name Eileen, E-I-L-E-E-N. I'm with Mazer Consulting.
Do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
I do.
Ms. Benira, have you testified before this board before?
I have not.
Okay, can you give the board the benefit of your experience and qualifications so that you can be qualified?
I have an undergraduate degree from William Patterson University and a master's in city and regional planning from Rutgers. I've been a professional planner for about 30 years. I've testified in front of about 100 different boards in the state of New Jersey. I'm a former planning director for a number of municipalities. I've had my own consulting firm and currently work for Mazer Consulting as a director of planning for Northern New Jersey.
Thank you, we'll accept you as a
Thank you.
expert witness.
Thank you. Can you just please provide the testimony supporting the two variances that the applicant is seeking tonight?
Sure, I'm going to hand out my exhibit because you're not going to probably be able to see it, so.
I'm not going to say one.
Day one. And this was not previously submitted. So I'm here tonight to go over the two variances and provide some planning testimony relative to the variances. Just by way of background information, I did look at your 2011 re-examination report prepared by Hiring Rule. I've looked at your zoning ordinance. I've read the two reports from DNR Engineering and Bignell, is that how it's pronounced? Planning, which was dated May 8th, and the DNR was dated 5/16th. And I believe those are the only reports I had received. And the presentation I'm going to just show you, I'll go through. But what I'm going to talk to you about is the statutory criteria required to satisfy a variance. We're looking at a C variance, and I'm going to suggest to you that I'm going to call this a C2 variance. I don't believe there's a hardship involved in this, but I'm going to go through my pictures with you, and you each have a copy of them. So I will talk this direction so that the public can see. So looking down, I think it's south down Easton Street. What's interesting about this, my photographs were, I was standing in the street most of the time when I took them, so as busy as Easton Avenue is, I was able to stand in the middle of the street around 2 o'clock in the afternoon and take some pictures. I also passed this site twice looking for it. So I went by twice because of the lack of signage, and not intentionally. I'm pretty much a homing pigeon when I'm looking for something, and I had to call the attorney and say, wait a minute, what street is it again? And he told me Senior, and even with knowing that, I went past it because of, I'm going to say, the activity on the street and also the landscaping on the street, which is nice, but it's also a little distracting. It obscures a few things. So just wanted to put that in as just a matter of information. So looking at photo 1, looking down the hospital is on the left-hand side. We're looking down Easton Street. I'm standing in the road at the corner of Gray and Easton. The building in question, you can see on the top right corner, 215. That's the only sign of that building. There's another building in the forefront right before that. Photo 2, I'm really in the intersection, and you can see that you can't even see 215 there because of the pole. The light pole that's there. So as you're coming down the street, depending upon where you are, you may not see that building without any kind of signage. Photo 3 is on Senior, and it just gives you a little picture of where the entrance, we've spoken this evening about where the entrance to the building is. So that's the entrance. There's a parking lot to the left. You can see it's substantial landscaping, I would say, going towards the hospital, and in the back is the parking garage in photo 3. Photo 4 is now looking, I believe, north, and to the west is our building and the property. And so this is the two corners of Senior Street with the commercial retail apartments above on the south corner. The north corner is the property in question for St. Peter's. And then as you move forward on photo 5 and photo 6, it's a little closer view. And again, you can see the landscaping on Senior Street and the tree cover, because it's kind of, again, hiding a little bit of the building. You really don't know what's happening there or what's going on at that site until you either turn down, if you're on Senior Street, you can see the signage over there, but you can't see really anything. It's a nice looking building, however, it's blank of any kind of identification other than the 215. And then you can see that from photo 6. I believe our previous witness also talked about a light above the door, which is also, you can see this in the building, and you can also see the street light, which is right above, on Easton Street, but right almost opposite that doorway. So that just gives you a little context as to, and on photo 6 is probably the best place to, just to look at, that's where the signage is going to be. So the signage, we require a variance for, 2 variances for signage. One is for the size of the sign, and one is the fact that it's internally illuminated. So, St. Peter's is across the street. They have a little bit of a thematic program going with their buildings. You don't know, this building is not owned by St. Peter's, but the signage is similar in lighting and characteristics to the other building across the street. So I think part of the testimony and part of my discussion on the lighting in the internally is to kind of join these 2 sites together across the street and harmonize both I'm going to call it a campus of St. Peter's, which is this little building and then the buildings across the street. So the internal illumination, as you can see from my photographs, and again, I'm actually excellent with directions, the fact that I went past it twice. So it's a place that, it's a facility that people they need to go to this facility. They shouldn't have to struggle looking for it. I think things should be made as easy as possible for the users of this facility. So a sign on that side wall would be appropriate. The sign is going to lay flat on that wall, and because it's going to lay flat on that wall, I think it needs to be larger, personally. We've represented that, and our other prior witness has also indicated that. The code calls for, I believe, a maximum of, it's based on 1 foot for every foot of building width, with a maximum of, I think, 24 or 25 feet. Thank you. 24 feet. Our sign is a 125-foot sign. It's 5 by 25, and it runs the length of the building, internally lit. So we are asking for a substantial variance, but again, I think in terms of the size of the sign, a small sign, again, when you can see as you're coming down, as you're driving down Easton Avenue and you're looking at the photographs that I provided you, I think you're going to be tough to see something that's laying against a building unless it's substantial. So I would suggest that the size of the sign, I think, is more than appropriate. The second reason why the size of the sign, and I'll get to the statutory criteria in a few minutes, the second reason why the size is important is St. Peter's doesn't own this building. There's no ornamentation, no structural changes that they could do, awnings, detailing on the building that would be advanced, I'm going to say, and maybe someplace else where they could put some signage. The only thing they can do on this is put signage. So in that effect, I think the signage may actually be, open up and maybe make that wall a little bit more interesting. Because right now, the building is a nice looking building. The Senior Street sign is well landscaped, and you really don't see a lot of that. The Easton side of the building, I'm going to say, is a little absent, and the signage, I think, actually will add a little bit of texture, color, and excitement to that side, besides the importance of being actually a placeholder and where someone can actually see where they're going. So, so I indicated it was a 20 by 5 foot internally lit on the, it's going to be facing west. The impacts of that sign, so one of the things you're always considering is, in any kind of variance, you have to argue both the positive and the negative criteria. I think the positive criteria I'm indicating to you, it's an essential, it's a hospital building, typically inherently beneficial use. I'm not arguing a use variance here, but satisfies the positive criteria right up front. The size of the sign, however, is going to be about what it looks like to the street and what kind of negative impacts. And that really speaks more to the negative criteria. In this case, the building is, as I indicated, is very plain. The building faces the parking garage. The illumination, while it's internally illuminated, the illumination stays on the property. And as the previous witness testified, it's internal, but it doesn't fall off the property, and it's right up against the building. So I think there's no negative impact from the illumination. The sign of the size of the sign, as I indicated, I think is important, number one, because I think there's a lot going on coming down the street. Even the hedges in picture 2, you can see from this office for rent, even these hedges here, there's some activity. It's nice, but again, it's attractive, but it's a little distracting on that side. So there's a lot of activity going on here. You need adequate signage on that building, which I believe we're proposing. There's vegetation on the ground level, but it's not substantial enough yet. It hasn't grown up big enough yet to, I'm going to say, fill out that side of the building. Again, our sign will be adequate in size, so when that vegetation matures, the sign will still be easily recognized. So relative to the positive and negative criteria for a C2 variance, which you probably are all aware is a flexible C. So number one, it has to specifically relate to a specific piece of property, which in this case, I think it does. The property and the size of the sign, I don't often testify for large signs. I think often you have to be very careful about what you're doing with your signage. I think it can look busy on the street, it could look very awkward. In this area, there's not a lot of signage and there's not a lot of indicators or even wayfinding signs that gives me a clue as to that St. Peter's. I knew St. Peter's was there because of the parking garage, but there was really no indication. So I think, relative to this particular property, when you see that parking garage, you may immediately think, okay, it's over there. It's not, and it's on the opposite side. So I think the larger sign, really addresses this particular property. In terms of advancing the municipal land use law, number one, it advances the I think it promotes the general welfare, health, safety, and welfare. Number one, because besides the health, safety, and welfare of the general public in terms of moving circulation down the street adequately, it also, as I indicated, hospitals inherently beneficial use, but it also, by having good signage, I think it eases the trip for anybody that's going to be visiting that facility. So I think it does meet the purposes, at least 3 of the purposes of the municipal land use law, which satisfies the positive criteria. It's also proximate to the existing hospital. The increased visibility will make the project, I think, safer and promotes the free flow of traffic. And again, I think it's an attractive sign, and I think it also creates an enhanced visual environment, because I think it'll actually enhance that side of the building. Regarding the negative criteria, there's 2 prongs to the negative criteria. One is that there's no substantial detriment to the public good, and again, I don't think this building impacts this sign impacts anyone. There's no residential neighbors that it's facing opposite. It's not in a residential neighborhood. It's adjacent to a commercial store on the ground level. The street is pretty much devoid of any kind of signage up and down. So again, I don't think there's any negative criteria, any detriment to the public good. And I think it keeps the block more in line with what your master plan talks about in terms of character and enhancing, avoiding residential neighborhoods in terms of commercial impacts. This really speaks to and really stays on Easton Avenue. The signage that's on Senior Ave is different, softer. That's in a residential neighborhood. I think it's appropriate in where it stands. Regarding the second prong of the negative criteria, impairment to the intent or purpose of the master plan or zoning ordinance, and whether you can reconcile that with the zone. Again, it's a sign variance. There's not a lot in your master plan about signage relative to building signs. It talks about wayfinding signage, but there's really very little to nothing about signage. In terms of your zoning ordinance speaks to signage in terms of it gives parameters, and it gives sizes, and it's your job to decide whether or not this is an appropriately sized sign given the testimony and, the information we're providing you. And my opinion, I believe it is. I believe it's an appropriate location, and I believe it's an appropriate sign. So in terms of going back to the C2 variance, benefits substantially outweigh the detriments. Again, I believe they do. I don't think there's any detriments. I think that the lighting is de minimis. I think it stays on site. It's just illuminating, backlighting of that sign. And the size of the sign, while it's not what's proposed by the ordinance, in this condition, in this situation, I believe it's appropriate. Given the hospital and the size of the hospital on the other side, I think it begs for something bigger on that side. And I believe I discussed already the intent, not impairment of the intent, purpose of the master plan and zoning ordinance. So I think for all of these reasons, I believe that the application, we can satisfy both the positive and negative criteria and are worthy of your approval should you so deem see fit. Thank you. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
There's questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to add the county's already given us a no action letter on this application.
Okay. At this time, we'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak to this? Yes? Please come forward.
Can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name again for me, please?
Jill Spector, LEWIS-SPECTOR. Yes. I have owned the property at 216 Eastern Avenue for more than 40 years. And during that time, there have been many variances applied for, and I have never come before this board about any of them because I was fine with what was going on. I saw houses raised and the buildings put up, the medical office put up. I was fine with all of that. But this sign really presents a problem for me because there are 2 bedrooms, so at 216 Eastern Avenue, directly across the street, which you can't see in these photographs, okay, is a 2-family house, and 2 of the bedrooms, one on the first floor and one on the second, are in the front. They're right on Eastern Avenue. So the light, even though the claim is the light doesn't extend across the street, the tenants there are going to have this bright light going into their bedrooms. They're going to see it, just like we see street lights when we're sleeping, and sometimes even though the light isn't coming into our bedroom, the light is there, and we are very much aware that the light is there. You can see it. They're applying for 2 variances, one for the light and one for the size. And I'd like to suggest that the size, which is 5 times what is permissible, I would like to suggest that that be reduced considerably. I don't think they need a sign that size. And, I don't know why the claim was made that this isn't a residential area, because there are quite a few houses in that area, and I'm not the only one that has a house right on Eastern Avenue. There's one right next to me, and I think there's maybe one after that. So we will be affected, and I'm very concerned that the light is going to be going into the bedrooms, those 2 bedrooms. So.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Those can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please?
Last name is Ewing, N-E-W-L-I-N-G.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
I do. I was a little puzzled by the sign. Was there actually a picture of the sign shown?
Yes,
Can I see it?
it's shown to the board.
And this So this is the picture, and this is how it would appear on the building.
Correct.
And as you've said, it's an illuminated sign with a light coming from the interior of the fitting.
Just the lettering lights.
Yeah. In terms of spotting the sign as one is coming up the street, would it not be more visible if you had a sign planted, you know, one of those V-shaped signs, in other words,
Freestanding signs are permitted.
Yeah, also there's a site triangle easement on the corner of Senior Street and Easton Avenue that would prohibit us putting a freestanding sign there.
you can't have a freestanding sign under where that sign would be?
No, sir.
You know, it extends pretty far down Easton Avenue, that would prohibit that kind of a sign.
I see, even though that would be easier actually to see if you're driving a car. So
But it would block someone driving from seeing a vehicle coming out of Senior Street. They would not be able to see that.
I'll show you. Let me just pull this up for you. So what the attorney is referring to, I believe we actually had a sign proposed on this corner at one point, did we not?
Correct.
We had
That was-
discussed that. So there's a site triangle. So when you're coming up out of the street,
I was seeing.
which is here, right at this corner, getting onto Easton, you can't have anything blocking in that corner.
yeah, but I'm not talking about in the corner, I'm talking about
This way.
I'm talking about mid-building, in other words, in the same position along the extent of the building.
The ordinance prohibits freestanding signs.
Well, isn't that what you're asking? Could you not ask for a variance from that prohibition for a freestanding sign?
This is more in keeping with the hospital campus as far as.
But wait a minute, there are freestanding signs in front of St. Peter's Hospital.
A different zone.
A different zone?
You can ask the questions, like,
Who am I asking the questions to? I thought I had to ask the questions.
they'll have them respond, just so.
Okay, I thought I had to get the questions from the experts.
Yeah, you do.
Through the chair.
Through the chair, okay. Through the... All right. Okay, so they could not apply for a variance for a freestanding sign in front of this building?
They could.
They could?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why not?
That's not what it's not what they presented to us.
I know it's not what they presented to you, and I'm suggesting that what they've presented to you, particularly in terms of its impact on people across the street, is not a very desirable option. And also, I think that they should have considered applying for a variance to allow them to have a freestanding sign that could be in front of the building, which would be visible from either direction. And it really is not this long sign on the front of the building. Actually, as you're driving along, you're not necessarily going to see that so easily, because it's not in the sight line so easily. So I think that all things considered, this application should be turned down, and they should be encouraged to apply for a variance for a freestanding sign, not illuminated, and then that identification is served. After all, we do see signs sticking out from buildings. The liquor store has a sign that hangs in front of it, up and down. That's very easy to see. So I don't, what's the problem? Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Yeah, I'll just add that a freestanding sign would have to be so high to be visible to cars that would probably defeat the purpose of replacing the facade sign.
So you don't think that a freestanding sign on that corner would do it?
Well, we're prohibited from putting a freestanding sign on the corner because of the
But
site
what
triangle.
if you were to do a freestanding sign, the same basic dimensions on the ground, maybe 4 feet tall?
So you wouldn't be able to see that if you were in a car because the car is going back and forth. The whole point is to see
Oh, okay.
the seat of the sign from the vehicle has to be high. So you wouldn't want a 20-foot freestanding sign. That would be, I think, worse than
Take into consideration, if I may, there's very little ground between the sidewalk and the building. So we'd be jamming something in there that would need, that I think would be out of place. The sign is only taking up less than a third of the facade area that's there, that's available. We calculated 1,925 square feet of building facade. We're less than 10% of that. So I just feel the sign is appropriate. I think it will be read. I think we'll be able to make a decision easily. That's St. Peter's. The sign will not light up the bedrooms across the street. It's not designed to do that. There's a, public service has a light pole there that sheds light down. Light does not beam across the street. Now, if they look out there, it's not going to shine into the bedroom. But if you look out the window, you're going to see light, you're going to see stars. This sign has no impact on anything across the street. So it has nothing, no impact on the sidewalk in front of the building.
Would you consider moving this sign down a little bit so that it's not in her residential area there? Like towards the corner of the building? Because her house is directly across the street, is what she said. Which makes sense, if that's 215, 216 would be across the street.
No, it's, her house is not directly across the street. I think it's her house is towards the end of the block. Because directly across the street is the parking garage.
205 apartment buildings that mentioned listed there. They're up there, 216, 218 are down towards the corner, then you have Dr. Amati's building, then the Cares building.
I have a question. What hours is the cancer center open? Roughly. I mean, you don't have to give it exactly. Rough hours.
Oh, usually 9, 10 o'clock if we're going to do expanded hours, but, you know, right now it's not operating at that. It's the whole purpose of catching people. First of all, get them from the hospital, so we get them started. I mean, we could turn this thing off at midnight.
Why don't we get you sworn in?
Yes, oh, sure.
Can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please?
Bob Mulcahy, M-U-L-C-A-H-Y.
H-Y, and do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes, I do. So we've talked about the illumination part of it. We don't want it to be a concern for the neighbors. We certainly don't. I don't feel that if you look at where it's lined up, it won't be, and that's why we went to the internal illumination. We're not illuminating the entire sign, we're just doing the letters. But we don't want a problem. We don't. We want to keep our neighbors happy. So we could turn this thing off on a timer after, let's say, you know, midnight or 11
Well,
o'clock.
how about 10 p.m., because no patients are going to come in. I mean, I'm sure that patients are
Yeah,
going to come in at 10.
I mean, yeah, that would be fine. I mean, if that's what it's going to take to get it approved, we don't want a problem with internal illumination. We feel the design is not going to be that, but just to ease your concerns, you know, obviously,
I think that's.
we're part of the community, we want our community to be happy, and we can easily do that.
Okay.
So we could turn it off at 10 o'clock, that'd be fine.
Thank you, that's very appreciated. Okay, is there anyone else from the public? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion. Any questions from the board? Okay.
Madam Chair, the board makes a positive recommendation to suggest the following conditions: compliance with the terms of the DNR engineering report dated May 16, 2017, submission of all necessary easements or cross-access agreements reviewed by or determined city engineer. Compliance with the terms of the Big Bell Consulting Group report dated June 21st, 2017, planning review escrow funded for all anticipated postal approval reviews, payment of the fees to the city of Brunswick related to development or use of the project. Payment of all outstanding taxes and water and sewer fees, Middlesex County Planning Board approval or waiver, and they testified they already have their exemption from that. Submission of architectural plans to comply with any changes required by the planning or engineering memos, and a special condition that the sign illumination be turned off after 10 p.m.
I'll second.
Evelyn Ascona.
Yes.
Doug Sheehan.
Yes.
John Zimmerman.
Yes. Ivan Adorno.
Yes.
Sue McGilligan.
Yes.
John Cox.
Yes.
Nancy Wolf.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Brotherhood of Hope Incorporated, P-2017-08, variance application for construction of an addition located at 15 Lafayette Street, Block 91, Lot 19, zoning district R-4. Is there anyone on the board that has a conflict for this application? Okay.
All right, good evening. Peter Vignolo, VIG, and UOLO from the Law Office of Clark and Vignolo on behalf of the applicant Brotherhood of Hope Incorporated. This is an application for property at 18 Lafayette Street in one of the city's R4 zones. The applicant purchased the property in June of 2006 for the purpose of providing a residence for Roman Catholic brothers who conduct community outreach at Rutgers University and in the surrounding community. The brothers in the applicant's organization, as well as several individuals who assist in their mission, reside in the home. The applicant is currently seeking to enlarge the home through the construction of 2 additions to the home. One addition will be located on the easterly side of the dwelling, over an existing den. It will house a stairwell that will provide access to the 2nd and 3rd floors of the dwelling. The second addition will be located at the rear of the dwelling, and it will consist of 3 stories and contain a meditation room and additional bedrooms. The proposed additions will increase the number of bedrooms from 5 to 6. There's currently a living room, dining room, and kitchen, and den on the first floor. The proposed first floor addition will create a meditation room and a bathroom at the rear of the dwelling, and the den will be converted into the stairwell for the 2nd and 3rd floor access. The existing 2nd floor contains 3 bedrooms, currently utilized for 2 bedrooms, and the other one is used as the meditation room. And the proposed addition will create 2 new bedrooms. The meditation room will be used as a library. The proposed 3rd floor addition will add 2 new bedrooms and convert the existing bedrooms into a recreation room. The variances required in connection with the applicant's project are for building coverage, where your maximum permitted is 35, existing is 32.2, and 38.3 is proposed. Impervious coverage, where the maximum permitted is 45%, 51.9% currently exists, and 58.01% is proposed. And the number of parking spaces were required are 4 spaces, and existing and proposed are 3.5 spaces. Additionally, variance is required for floor area ratio, where the maximum permitted is 0.5, existing is 0.67, and proposed is 0.9. There are 3 witnesses which the applicant will provide tonight. The first is Brother Jude, a representative of the applicant. The second is Jim Maskerson, the applicant's architect, and the third is Angelo Valatudo, the applicant's professional planner. And in case you have any questions of me, I can call my first witness.
Thank you.
Super.
Brother Jude.
Can you raise your right hand and state your name, spell your last name for me?
Jude Lasota, Lasota.
Can you affirm and tell the truth in this matter?
Brother Jude, what's your relationship to the applicant?
I'm local superior of the house. I lead the house.
And for how long have you served in that capacity?
9 years.
And can you give a brief history of the mission and activities of Brotherhood of Hope?
Sure. Brotherhood of Hope is a religious order founded in 1980. We're approved in the Archdiocese of Boston. We were invited to the Diocese of Metuchen work at Rutgers in 2005 by Bishop Bukowski. We work at Rutgers campus with graduate students, undergraduate students, providing a community, a family for them while they're away from home. We do that through outreach work, we do that through counseling, we do that through prayer, spirituality, and liturgies. We're assigned to St. Peter's Church. That's where we work out of St. Peter's Church in the Catholic Center there.
And when did the applicant acquire the property?
2006.
And how many floors exist on the property?
3.
And is the basement usable?
Just washing machines. It's low ceiling.
Okay. How many bedrooms are currently in the dwelling?
5.
And how many are proposed?
6.
And how many individuals currently reside at the dwelling?
8.
And if the application were to be approved, how many would reside?
8, 9, most.
Okay. And who are the individuals who currently reside at the dwelling?
Right now we have 5 religious brothers living there, and we have 3 mission leaders, and these are men who take a year or 2 of their life after school and work with us and help us on the campuses, bring people to the church. Yeah.
Okay. How are meals taken at the property?
Communally.
Okay. And are there door locks in the bedrooms? How is property maintenance handled at the house?
I cut the grass.
Do the brothers pay rent to reside in the house?
No,
Do the mission leaders pay rent?
no,
Are the brothers or the mission leaders charged for their meals in the house?
no.
Do the brothers own vehicles at the property?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Are those vehicles owned by the brothers individually or owned by the organization?
By the religious order.
Okay. And those communal vehicles are available to the brothers who reside there?
Exactly.
Do any of the mission leaders own vehicles on the property?
Yes, this year 2 out of 3 have vehicles.
And if the application were approved by the board, is it anticipated that the number of vehicles would increase?
No.
Currently, who does the cooking at the property?
I do.
Are any religious services in which the outside community is invited in to residents conducted?
No, we do all of our liturgies and masses at St. Peter's.
Okay. How are trash and recycling handled at the property?
3 garbage cans and 3 recycling bins.
And those are just put out on the appropriate days?
It's out this morning.
Okay. And would this continue if the application were approved?
Yes.
And do you possess any parking permits for the property?
We have 3 homeowner and 2 guest permits.
I have no further questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please.
My name is Jim Masterson. My last name is Masterson.
Thank you. Swear to tell the truth, this matter?
Okay, Mr. Masterson, could you provide the board with your credentials as an architect?
I went to the
Mr.
University of
Vignola,
Maryland.
you've been before this board before, haven't you?
I have not. Okay.
I'm sorry. Thought you had.
I'm sorry.
Went to the University of Maryland. I received my architect's license in New Jersey in 1989. I also hold an architect's license in New York. I'm currently the vice president of Crane Associates, which is an AE firm out of Somerville, New Jersey, which was established in 1965.
Yes, we'll accept your
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Masterson, did you prepare the architectural plans?
I did the design.
And can you describe what exists on the site today?
Absolutely. You have these exact same drawings. The drawing.
Referring to which page, Mr. Masterson?
Okay, I'm on drawing A101 of the floor plans. And so the way that the sheet is set up is on the left, there's the existing plan. On the right is the addition, what we are proposing. So the existing residence is what you would like to know about is, I would describe it as a 3-story center hall colonial, probably built around 1920. Typical residence, it's a handsome building, and it's in great condition. You enter from the street side across an open porch, which is open on 3 sides. You enter the facility where there's a center hall, the stairway going up to the 2nd floor. On the right side, there's a large bedroom, living room that goes from the front of the building to the rear. On the left, there's a dining room, a small den, and a kitchen. And in the back of the house, there's a tiny powder room. On the 2nd floor, as you go up the stairs, there's an intermediate landing. You turn back. The intermediate landing is about 2 feet or so, a little less than 2 feet below the floor level of the rest of the 2nd floor. You turn towards the front of the house. There's a bedroom immediately to your right. There's a bedroom at the front of the building. This bedroom at the front of the building currently is used as the meditation room. There's no access directly off it to the existing bathroom that's there. There's a small study at the center of the house. And there's a larger bedroom, probably the largest bedroom in the existing house right now. And there's also a bathroom on that floor that's immediately accessible to that large bedroom. On the upper level, there's basically there's a small hallway at the top of the stairs. And to your left and right, there's small bedrooms. And you can see in the section in the photos that we've included that it was originally designed as an attic space, I believe, or it has only about less than 5 feet away from the bathroom and closet in the room. The ceiling immediately starts to slope quickly towards the front of the house. That's the existing conditions.
Hey, can you please review the proposed expansion?
Sure. We went through a couple scenarios, a couple schemes. We thought about raising the roof on the front 2 bedrooms up on the 3rd floor, but we really wanted to maintain the character because we think the house has a great character to it right now, fits very comfortably into the neighborhood. So that was one of our first things that we decided not to do, was touch the roof as much as possible in the front of the house. So we played with an addition out the side, and finally we decided to put the addition in the rear. The whole point of the addition was to provide more comfortable bedroom spaces. And so the size of the addition is 16, it extends out the back of the building 16 feet. That size was dictated by the size of bedroom number 3. What we did was, because there was an intermediate landing between the 2nd and 3rd floor, the 1st and 2nd floor, we decided to raise the floor level at that landing and make the stair run straight from the 1st to 2nd floor. What that did was that started to push the addition out the back, because we had to, by code, provide a landing at the top of the stair line. And so from there, we created what we felt was a minimal sized bedroom, which is the proposed bedroom number 3. It's a little less than 11 feet straight out the back. And basically the rest of the addition is just a function of that starting point with that bedroom number 3. And so on the first floor level, as we go through the center hallway, all the original rooms of the house stay the way they are, except the den on the driveway side of the property. We use that to create a second means of egress from the upper levels, a second stairway. On the rear of the house, we proposed changing that small bedroom space up on the 2nd floor, which was used for meditation, to be a meditation room on the 1st level, down at ground level. That's our revisions on the 1st floor. The 2nd floor, we discussed the bedrooms at the back. Also, there would be stairs to that level. And on the 3rd floor, what we did was, in an effort to reduce the impression that there were so many available bedrooms, especially in this oppressive space on the 3rd floor, we just opened that area up. We took out the walls, which were originally basically a little hallway, and it just made that one space. And we put the bedrooms at the back, which the size of those bedrooms do seem large. They are a function of what the addition is below. The main thing about actually, if you want, okay. The main thing about what we tried to do was, some of the rooms give the impression that they could be bedrooms. That's not our intent. Right now, the bedroom number 3 and bedroom number 5 have no direct access to bathrooms. And so that's why we have a proposed library, which will be used as a library. We took the doorway out of there, so it does provide a more direct access to the only bathroom that it would have access to, directly off a hallway. And the same thing up in the upper level. Bedroom number 5 would use what's proposed as a rec room as direct access to the bathroom and the stairways too.
In your opinion, is the style of the proposed additions compatible with the existing dwelling and the surrounding neighborhood?
Yes, well, we took pains to try and keep the style of the front of the building sympathetic to what the house was, what the existing house is. We just the existing house had 3 dormers that were punched through a gable roof. We just extended that gable roof over towards the driveway. That would be the stair tower, the new stair tower. In the back of the house where the addition is, we tried to absolutely maintain the height of the building. We also tried to maintain the soffit heights, and we also grabbed a little of the architectural vocabulary of 3 of the houses on the same street, which we grabbed this gambrel type fascia boards, just to be a little more sensitive to the other buildings in the neighborhood. It's a residential style.
Just turning to the engineering report prepared by the board engineer dated June 26, 2017, the second revision. There was a engineering comment asking for the location of water supply lines and existing sanitary sewer lines on the proposed site layout. Can the applicant provide those if the application were approved?
I didn't have time to prepare for that. We received that engineering report today, but there was a good point in the engineering report that the sewer and the supply lines have to be separated by 5 feet. We would absolutely do that. I'm sure it's a code issue. If it's not that, if we find that's not the condition right now, we'll certainly change the locations.
There was also a concern over site drainage, and the applicant did submit a engineer's report concerning stormwater management on the site. Is that correct?
I did not prepare that
Right.
report. We hired a civil engineer to prepare that report, and what they did was they looked at the impact that the addition would have on the storm drainage. And from that letter that was submitted to the board, it was implied that it's 0.04 cubic feet per second, which he described as a small amount. And could be handled by basically the stormwater on the property doesn't drain to our neighbors, drains to the street.
I have no further questions for Mr. Masterson.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name?
Yes, sir. Angelo J. Valatudo, Valetuto.
And do you swear to the truth in this matter?
Yes, sir, I do.
Mr. Valtudo, have you appeared before the zoning board previously?
I have approximately about 18 months with a gentleman by the name of James Clarkin.
I can have you go through his credentials.
Now, have your credentials changed since the last time you were before us?
My pat answer is only gotten longer. But no, not negatively.
Then we'll accept you as an
Thank you, ma'am.
Great, thank you very much. Are you familiar with the application that's been filed, and have you reviewed the engineering and architectural plans?
Yes, sir, I have.
And have you also reviewed the city's master plan and its zoning ordinance?
I have.
And have you visited the site?
Yes, sir, I have.
And as well as the surrounding neighborhood?
I did.
And can you talk about the location of the property and the neighborhood in which it's located?
Sure. Well, as we've heard, the property is located on Lafayette Street. There are 6 properties that are fronting on Lafayette Street between Sicard and College. On either side of the subject property, it appears to be residential, single family. And then beyond that are 3 properties that are owned by the university. 2 related, one to the Department of Naval Services, I believe it says. The other is a Veterans Home, Office of Veteran and Military Programs and Services. And the final one indicated Rutgers Health Services, Outreach, Promotion, and Hope. Across the street is just park area.
Park, correct?
Correct.
What variances does the applicant require in connection with that?
As listed in the application, we require one for building coverage where 35% is permitted. Right now, we're slightly under at 32.2%. However, with the addition in the rear, that brings us up to 38.3%. And also impervious coverage where 45% is permitted. We're presently in excess of that at 51.9%. And if approved tonight, the application would bring that up to 58.01%.
Is the impervious coverage a function of the fact that the property is currently approved with a detached garage and a driveway running the length of the property?
That's correct. And one of the benefits of being able to provide as much off-street parking as the property is providing is the fact that it comes at the cost of impervious coverage.
Is the building coverage variance also a function of the secondary access provided by the stairwell on the left side of the property?
That is correct.
Okay. Will the proposed addition to the rear of the property be visible from the street?
It will not be. The only evidence of the addition that we're seeking, as identified by the architect and shown on this drawing, is the on the front elevation where we're adding the extra 2 stories on the left side, the driveway side.
Turning to the additional variances, does the applicant also require a parking variance?
That's correct. We required 4. We're able to provide under ordinance 3.5, which in my opinion is a de minimis amount. We did hear from Brother Jude that beyond the 3.5 that we provide on site, in terms of the ordinance standards, we also own 3 owner parking permits and 2 guest permits, so that the combination exceeds what is required by the ordinance.
Mr. And finally, the applicant does require a floor area ratio variance in connection with this application. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. The zone permits 0.5. We're presently over at 0.67. However, with the addition both to the rear and the side, that brings us up to 0.9 as a floor area ratio.
And I think we did hear the standard earlier this evening, but if you could just refresh the board's, rather than refresh recollection on the standard for an FAR variance.
Oh, I'm sorry, 0.5.
No, the standard for granting a variance. What is the standard that they need to consider? So,
Whether or not it can be handled in terms of, by exceeding it, in terms of...
so the question is whether the property can accommodate the concerns associated with exceeding the floor area ratio standard.
That's correct. That's correct.
As previously discussed, can the property meet the parking requirement?
It can, as we spoke about, both on-site and through the advent of the 3 and 2 permit parking spaces that we have, or permits.
Based upon the report submitted by the applicant's engineer, Mr. Parker, will there be any stormwater management problems associated with this application?
None whatsoever. I did hear the testimony by the architect, and although I didn't see the report, I have visited the site as I testified to earlier, and I think I could put an umbrella, given the fact that it looks like it's close to 10:30, that we will comply with all the comments in the engineering report.
And is there any outdoor recreation space provided on the property, despite the fact that the floor area ratio will be exceeded?
There's an area of about 30 by 36 in the rear yard, which is outside recreation area, and then as you heard from the architect, there's going to be what I would probably refer to as mental recreation area on the inside with the advent of the library.
And is the FAR variance a function of the use that the applicant has in this application?
Yes, sir. It is certainly a unique use, but one that is greatly beneficial to the neighborhood and primarily the university.
So in your professional opinion, can the property handle all of the issues associated with exceeding the FAR standard and so on?
Yes, sir. In my opinion, it can, again, based on our use of the property and the history that we've been using the property for, it will allow us to enhance the brothers' use of the property while also enhancing their benefit to the university.
And then moving back to the bulk coverage, impervious coverage, and parking variances, can these be justified under the municipal land use law positive criteria?
Yes, sir. In my opinion, it can.
And would that be under a flexible C2 analysis?
It has, and I'm not going to go into the flexible C. If anyone didn't know what a flexible C2 is, certainly the first 2 cases more than went into it. But essentially, we have to identify whether or not the benefits outweigh any detriments from the granting of the variance and do it as a balancing act. In my opinion, the granting of these variances will allow the applicant, as we indicated, who has been doing the good work for these many years, to continue its religious mission and expand its outreach programs at the university and in the surrounding community.
And then move to the negative criteria, can the variances be granted without substantial detriment to the zone plan and zoning ordinance of the city of Brunswick?
Yes, sir. In my opinion, they can. I look at such things as drainage, which is not an issue, and parking, which, as we testified, is not an issue. With that, the architect's comments is certainly accurate. The house and its architecture is well fitting within what's in the neighborhood and will continue to do so. And even with the addition in the front, we'll still continuing that same character.
And finally, can the application and the variances be granted without substantial detriment to the public good?
Yes, in my opinion, once again, the fact that the scope of the variances, in my opinion, are modest and plays a part in the conclusion, but most importantly, as I previously mentioned, there is no detriment to light, air, and open space, which is one of the considerations for the board.
I have no further questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
That is some substance to the applicant's presentation.
Okay, thank you. Now, we will open it up to the public. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak to this application?
Bruce, can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please, again?
Bruce Newling, N-E-W-L-I-N-G.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
I do. Members of the Board of Adjustment, I have the unusual situation of being the person who introduced Brother Jude to the previous owner of this property. I guess it was about 9 years ago. And of course, he and his colleagues moved in, and I think they've been very happy there. The question I have relates not so much to the present situation, but to the possible future situation. Some of you may have been on this board at the time an application was made by the owner of 61 Huntington Street to put its a long lot reaching from Huntington Street right through to the park. And they wanted, there was a house, is a house at the beginning, at the Huntington side of the property, but the rear of the property was quite empty, and they wanted to put a house in there. And so they came before the board. One of the board members had to be recused because he was the brother of one of the applicants. And the impression was given that the applicants there were going to live in this house. That turned out to be not the case. The house was sold, and it found a very appropriate use for disabled people, and that was a good use for it. But it was a very different use from what was projected, I'll say, at the application meeting. Now, the question that occurs to me is, and I guess through the chair I have to ask, what is the financial support that the brothers are provided with? Who pays their salary? Who gives them the reason for being in New Brunswick? I guess is the question.
Yeah, Bruce, answer that question. Some of us get stipends from the Diocese of Metuchen to work for campus ministry. Some of us get paid directly from the parish, and then a lot of fundraising. Fundraising from alumni, things like that.
I see, okay. So that if the diocese, all these different funding sources should suddenly discover that, as sometimes happens, they have to cut back, then the financial support, in other words, evaporates. The brothers would not be able to continue on, I imagine, in New Brunswick. And that would mean that they would have to give up the property and sell it. And the trouble is, with this kind of expansion, you will remember that they described a meditation room and a library. Now, I've lived on Huntington Street since 1965. Not the oldest resident in the 6th Ward, but I've been there a pretty long time. And I have seen the transformation that occurred since May of '65 when I arrived there. Switched from 2 family homes, invariably owner-occupied with a rental property above or below. Now I am one of 3 resident owners on Huntington Street, from George Street at one end to Eastern Avenue. The area has changed completely. And my concern is that the way this project is proposed, if the brothers found that they could not continue, or they were drawn to some other campus town that they felt they had a mission to serve, this property then becomes ripe for student occupants. And so instead of having 6 bedrooms occupied, you would have then the library converted into a bedroom, the meditation room converted into a bedroom. There's a little studio, I believe, on the 3rd floor. What the studio's function is, I'm not clear about, but so what I'm saying is this property then would become another rabbit warren in the 6th ward. And so I think that we need to receive an assurance from the brothers that they expect to stay at this site for the foreseeable future. Now, whether they can give that kind of assurance, I don't know, but what I'm saying is that this, to me, creates the possibility of a conversion over to a use very different from what we're accustomed to. And Lafayette Street, in the plot described, is one of the most prestigious, or was one of the most prestigious streets in the city of New Brunswick. The house next door, the corner house, that's where federal Judge Smith lived. Further down the block, one of the houses now owned by Rutgers, is where Judge Morrison lived. This was a distinguished street. Now, nothing ever, of course, stays the same. Always change. But it is a beautiful residential street still. Rutgers property is beautifully maintained. The property that the brothers occupy is beautifully landscaped. And I'd like the board to ask Brother Jude, is there any likelihood that he and his colleagues will be moving from this property in the near or not so near future?
Sure. Not in the foreseeable future. I think our track record has been, we own residents, well, first of all, we're in many locations, several locations, I should say. We're in New Jersey, we're in Boston, okay, and we work at Northeastern University, we're at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, we're in Tallahassee, Florida State University, and we just opened a house at the University of Central Florida. Our oldest outreach is right now in Tallahassee, Florida. We bought that house in 1996, and we've been there ever since. Our house in Boston, we rented for 20 years, and we just purchased 2 houses in Boston for the brothers' use. We have a long-term commitment to those areas. And so for the foreseeable future, I don't see us moving anywhere.
Well, is there any, bearing in mind my worry that if they did move, and this can happen, that the house might be then converted over to dense student use. Is there any way of stipulating that the house must be maintained as a religious site? That's not the kind of restriction that you can...
I see Mr. Viola wants to offer something. So
Well, I think what the applicant can remind the board is that there's currently a number of bedrooms in the house. If any conversion of the house to expand the number of bedrooms would increase the parking, which would require a variance, which would mean someone would have to come back before this board and seek variance relief in order to increase the occupancy of the site. So it's not the Brotherhood of Hope would leave the property and automatically rooms would be converted from open space and walls put up and, well, it might happen. My mother grew up at 45 Richardson Street. I've known the 6th ward my whole life. So, these things can happen, but obviously that's why the city has enforcement. The city enforces its ordinances. It stops things from happening that shouldn't happen. But if someone were to try to do it legally, they would have to come before the board and seek a variance.
I'm just going to go a little alternative on that, what the applicant thinks, the board thinks. One would be that if the board does approve the additions of the bedrooms which generate the parking variance and the FAR and so forth, that there could be a deed restriction that says if this particular use stops, this is still being used as a single family house, but it has some special conditions as to the types of people that are living there and how it's being used. That if it stops being used for that purpose, because the folks cease to use the property, that the variance for the additional bedroom for the parking, that would cease and would go back to being a 5-bedroom house, which is what it is currently.
So we can put, that can be a stipulation?
If, well,
If I can be heard.
Why don't we let the applicant address
Okay,
it first?
the property is owned by the Brotherhood of Hope. They are a charitable religious organization. If they were to leave the property, it would probably be because they needed to sell the property. And at the point where you remove all variance relief from the property, they have a white elephant. They have a property that's larger than everything around, or not larger than everything, but a significantly large home on Lafayette Street that would then not be capable of being used for, what its use is now, a 6-bedroom house. So perhaps a deed restriction limiting the number of bedrooms in the house could accomplish the same thing without perhaps reverting back to the necessity for variance relief if they wanted to sell the house.
I'm not, in terms of the history of the approvals, I don't know that there's a use variance that was ever granted for this particular use.
It's used as a single family, it's a permitted use.
Right, and to deed restrict the use to just this owner, and then they lose the ability to use the bedrooms, which would be what the granting of the variances would be. I don't know that we could do that by way of a deed restriction. And as Mr. Vignolo had pointed out, not to mention the fact that it would be difficult to sell, which shouldn't be the primary concern of the board, the variance that's granted would run with the land. So if there's an illegal conversion of further bedrooms, or if there's an illegal occupancy of those bedrooms by further subdividing or using non-bedroom spaces as bedrooms, that would be an enforcement issue. I'm not sure how we can do a deed restriction legally to restrict it to just their use of the property.
Okay, how about if we, how many people did you say would be living in the house right now?
I think we said 8 or 9.
And
There's 8 now.
That would be the max, like, that you would have in there, if the addition is granted, correct?
Right.
Could we put a restriction on that only 8 or 9 people can live in that house?
What's the maximum occupancy that's permitted?
It depends on the size of the bedrooms. I mean, if the bedroom gets larger than a certain size, people are allowed to live there, and it depends on what the city's standard is. I mean, our standards are different than what the state standards are. If we adopted the state standards instead, more people would be allowed to live there and so forth.
I think without significantly compromising the applicant's mission, if we could do 10 people, which would allow for some double occupancy in the rooms, without it, or I guess we could do 9 with the ability to come back to the board if circumstances changed and they needed to seek relief from that condition of approval.
I guess my concern is that, and maybe your architect could explain that, the size of the bedrooms right now, as is, plus the size of the new bedroom, how many would be the maximum amount of people that under, ordinances, can we do that? And then we can, because I guess my concern would be, if they sold the house and the bedrooms are big enough, then all of a sudden we could have 13, 14, 15 people move.
No, I understand.
And that's what I think is a big concern. And if we can restrict that even down to the 10, like you said, to give you the extra 1 or 2, I wouldn't have a problem. But is there a way we can do those?
To the extent that their outreach may grow a little bit, I want to give a little bit of a buffer so that we're not coming back again.
Yeah, just a lot of,
No, and I understand the board's concern.
Working out into 15, 20 people living in one house.
The applicant would be more than happy to take 10 as a deed restriction on the occupancy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I suppose so. But I am concerned because things can change, and I've seen it happen in the 50 plus years I've been there. And currently the not People's National Bank, the Bank of America on the corner of Eastern Avenue is going to close down. And the belief is, the reason that they're closing it down is that they can sell that site for a big pile of money for development. And the temptation
to sell a property that is large and commodious and has multiple uses can be very great. And so if it happens, you'll know you heard this concern expressed in these chambers at this time.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Is there anyone else here from the public that would like to know?
Can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name, please?
Yes, Michael, last name Brain, B-R-A-I-N.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes, sir. I'll keep it real short. I'm the owner of 20 Lafayette right next door. I support the proposal 100%. Nothing but great neighbors, as you can imagine.
Oh, thank you. Okay, anybody else from the public? Seeing no one, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Does the board have any questions? We're good.
You make a motion to approve, so yes, the following conditions, compliance with the terms of the city engineering report dated June 26, 2017, submission of all necessary easements or cross-access agreements reviewed by the board attorney and city engineer, payment of site performance bond, amount reviewed by the city engineer, submission of site inspection escrow deposit for city engineering inspection fees, amount to be calculated pursuant to 1624-160, payment of all water and sewer connection fees, pursuant to titles 1304 and 1308, issuance of road opening permit from the city engineer if required, compliance with the terms of the city planning report dated June 23rd, 2017, payment of any other fees due to the city of New Brunswick related to development of the project, Freehold Soil Conservation District approval or waiver, submitting engineering site plan to comply with any changes required by the planning or engineering memos or plan amendments offered at the hearing, submit architectural plans to comply with any changes required by the planning or engineering memos or plan amendments offered at the hearing, and a deed restriction to limit the occupancy of the house to a maximum of 10 persons.
Okay.
I'll make a motion with, with those stipulations. Yeah. I'll second.
Evelyn Ascona? Doug Sheehan?
Yes.
John Zimmerman?
Yes.
Ivan Adorno?
Yes.
Sue McElligott?
Yes.
John Cox?
Yes.
Nancy Cole?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And I want to tell you that you did a beautiful job. That house is beautiful.
Thank you.